If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. The morning fog hung thick over the Everglades as I guided my canoe through the narrow channels between the mangroves. My paddle barely made a sound as it cut through the dark water. That's how I liked it. Silent, observant. The swamp had its own language, and after 5 years as a ranger here, I was finally starting to understand it. My name is Leroy Washington, 33 years old. Former marine biologist, now one of the first black park rangers in the Everglades. Some folks around here still weren't used to that fact, but the animals and trees didn't seem to mind. This summer of 1972 had been strange. The rains we normally counted on hadn't come, leaving parts of the park drier than I'd ever seen them. Animals were behaving oddly too, alligators abandoning their usual territories, birds migrating out of season. Something wasn't right. I'd been sent out to investigate reports of poachers in the southern section. With the drought, some of the more remote channels had become easier to access, and that always brought trouble. But as I rounded a bend in the waterway, what I found wasn't poachers. It was a fishing boat drifting sideways in the channel, its motor tilted up. No one was at the helm. "Hello?" I called out, paddling closer. "Park ranger, anyone on board?" No answer came, but as I pulled alongside, I heard something. A small whimper coming from beneath a tarp in the bow. Carefully, I tied my canoe to the boat and climbed aboard, one hand resting on my sidearm. When I lifted the tarp, I found a small girl curled up in a ball, her eyes wide with terror. Couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She flinched when I reached toward her. "It's okay," I said softly. "I'm Ranger Washington. I'm here to help." I showed her my badge. "What's your name, sweetie?" She just stared at me, trembling. "Where are your parents?" I asked, looking around the empty boat. There were signs of a struggle. A broken fishing rod, scattered tackle, a cooler overturned with sandwiches and sodas spilled across the deck. The girl finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. The tall man from the water took them. A chill ran down my spine despite the muggy heat. "What tall man? Can you tell me what happened?" But she just repeated those same words, rocking slightly. "The tall man from the water took them." I radioed it in, and within an hour, the boat launch was swarming with park staff, local police, and emergency services. The girl, Lily Cooper, according to ID found in a wallet on the boat, was wrapped in a blanket and being examined by a paramedic. "Any sign of the parents?" asked a familiar voice behind me. I turned to see Diane Mackenzie, my partner, stepping out of her Jeep. At 28, she was 5 years younger than me, but carried herself with the confidence of someone much older. Before joining the Park Service, she'd worked in forensic science up north. "Nothing yet," I said. "Search teams are out looking. 3 adults missing. The girl's parents and an uncle, best we can figure." Diane frowned, watching as Sheriff Earl Pickman strutted around, barking orders at his deputies. "Pickman thinks it's an alligator attack." I shook my head. "Gators don't drag 3 grown adults off a boat without leaving any blood, and they sure don't close the cooler afterward." "What do you think happened then?" I hesitated, remembering the girl's words. "Not sure yet, but whatever it was, scared that child half to death." Pickman spotted us and headed over, his weathered face set in its usual scowl. He'd made it clear from my first day that he didn't think I belonged here, not in his county, and certainly not wearing a badge. "Washington," he said, not bothering with my title. "You found the boat?" I nodded. "About 2 miles south, in Crooked Channel. And you didn't see anything suspicious? No other boats? No persons of interest?" The way he emphasized that last part made his meaning clear. "Just the girl, and an empty boat, Sheriff," I replied evenly. He snorted. "Well, I'll tell you what happened. Those city folks probably got liquored up fell overboard and drowned. Happens every summer." "All three of them?" Diane asked, while the child stayed perfectly safe on the boat. Pickman's face darkened. "You got a better theory, Miss Mackenzie?" Before either of us could answer, one of the paramedics approached. "The girl's physically fine," he reported. "No injuries we can find, but she's in shock, keeps drawing these pictures." He handed me a sheet of paper. On it, Lily had drawn stick figures of what I assumed were her family members. Standing behind them was a tall, misshapen figure, its arms impossibly long, reaching down toward the people. Its eyes were colored in bright yellow. "Get a statement from Washington and wrap this up," Pickman told his deputy. "I want missing persons alerts out by noon." He walked away, already pulling out his cigarettes. "Charming as ever," Diane muttered. I was about to respond when an old airboat pulled up to the launch. Gabriel Fontaine stepped off, his weathered face creased with concern. At 67, Fontaine was a fixture in the Everglades, a Haitian-American tour guide who knew the swamp better than anyone. "Leroy," he called, making his way over to us. "I heard the call on my radio. Another disappearance?" I nodded. "Family of 3. Only the little girl was left behind." Gabriel's eyes drifted to the child, then back to me. "Where did it happen?" "Crooked Channel." He crossed himself, a gesture I'd never seen him make before. "The water's been dropping fast there. Faster than it should, even with the drought." "What are you saying, Mr. Fontaine?" Diane asked. Gabriel looked around, then lowered his voice. "The old stories say, when the waters recede in certain places, things that were sleeping wake up." Before I could ask what he meant, the paramedics started loading Lily into an ambulance. I walked over to say goodbye to her. "You're going to be okay, Lily," I said gently. "These people will take good care of you." She grabbed my hand suddenly, her small fingers digging into my palm. "He's tall," she whispered, "and his eyes glow in the dark. Don't let him get you too." As the ambulance doors closed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much worse than a simple disappearance. The drought, the animals fleeing, and now this. The Everglades was trying to tell us something, and I had a sinking feeling we wouldn't like the message. The next morning I went back to Crooked Channel at first light. Something about the empty boat kept bothering me. Families don't just vanish without a trace. I needed to check the area myself, away from Pickman and his deputies stomping around. The water level had dropped another inch overnight. Patches of mud were showing where there should have been water deep enough to float a boat. I beached my canoe on a small island of exposed ground and stepped out carefully. The mud sucked at my boots as I moved toward the spot where I'd found the drifting boat. That's when I saw them, footprints in the mud, but these weren't human tracks. I crouched down, measuring one with my hand. Each print was nearly twice the size of my spread fingers, with 3 distinct toes and what looked like webbing between them. They were fresh, the edges still damp. "What the hell are you?" I muttered. I followed the tracks along the mud bank. They led straight to the middle of a flat expanse of mud, then simply stopped, as if whatever made them had simply disappeared, or been lifted straight up. I took photos and made plaster casts of the best prints. Diane would want to see these. She might even know what animal could have made them, though I'd never seen anything like them in my years studying marine biology. When I got back to Ranger headquarters, Diane was poring over maps of the park, marking the spot where the boat had been found. "Look at this," I said, setting the plaster casts on her desk. She picked one up, frowning. "What animal made these?" "I was hoping you might know. 3-toed with webbing." She shook her head. "Too big for an alligator, way too big for a bird, and the wrong shape entirely for a bear." Before we could discuss it further, the radio crackled to life. 3 more tourists were missing. Their airboat had been found abandoned near Gator Tooth Creek, about 5 miles from where I'd found the Cooper family's boat. We took a Park Service airboat out there immediately. What we found made my skin crawl. The tourist's airboat was wedged against a cypress knee, its metal frame bent and twisted. The engine had been torn completely out, leaving jagged edges of metal. Deep gouges scored the aluminum hull, claw marks from something powerful enough to rip through metal. "This wasn't an accident," Diane said quietly, running her fingers along one of the gouges. I nodded, looking around at the water. "And it's not too far from where I found the Cooper boat." Back at headquarters, we spread out a map and marked both locations. Over the next week, we added more information: water level readings from across the park, animal sighting reports, and weather data. "There's a pattern here," I said one night as we worked late. "Both disappearances happened during the new moon, and both in areas where the water has recently dropped." Diane leaned over the map. "You're right. And look at this. Reports of wildlife fleeing these same areas just days before each incident. The animals know something's coming," I murmured. "Don't tell me you're starting to believe in monsters, Leroy," she said with a slight smile, but I could see worry in her eyes. "I believe in what I can observe, and what I'm observing is that something unusual is happening in my park." 2 days later, I decided to patrol Sawgrass Prairie at night. The water there had been receding quickly, and if my theory was right, it might be the next target area. The Everglades at night is a different world. Sounds carry differently. Shadows move in ways they shouldn't. I kept my flashlight off, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness as I guided my canoe through the narrow channels. Around midnight, I heard a heavy splash about 50 yards ahead. I froze, listening. Another splash, followed by a dragging sound. Something big was moving through the water. I eased my canoe forward, staying close to the bank where the shadows were deepest. As I rounded a bend, I saw it, a massive hunched figure standing knee-deep in the water. It was pulling something heavy onto a small island near a sinkhole. My heart hammered in my chest. The figure must have been at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. In the darkness, I could make out broad shoulders and long arms. Then it turned slightly, and 2 yellowish eyes reflected the moonlight like a cat's. I reached for my camera, but in my nervousness, I knocked my paddle against the side of the canoe. The sound was tiny, but in the quiet night it might as well have been a gunshot. The figure went still. Those glowing eyes turned directly toward me. For a long, terrible moment, we stared at each other across the water. Then it melted into the darkness so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. When I got to the island, all I found was scattered personal items, a man's watch, a torn piece of clothing, and a leather wallet. And everywhere, coating the ground and the nearby plants, was a thick black substance that smelled worse than anything I'd encountered before, like rotting vegetation and dead fish left in the sun for days. I gagged, covering my nose with my handkerchief as I collected samples of the substance. Whatever I'd seen, it was real, and it was hunting in my park. The next day, I went to see Gabriel Fontaine. If anyone would know about strange creatures in the Everglades, it would be him. Found him fixing his airboat outside his small cabin on the edge of the park. When I showed him my plaster casts and described what I'd seen, the color drained from his face. "You saw Le Roi des Marais," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The what?" "The King of the Swamp," Gabriel translated. "An old, old story. The runaway slaves who hid in these swamps spoke of it. So did the native tribes before them. What exactly is it supposed to be?" I asked, trying to keep the skepticism from my voice. Gabriel sat down heavily on an overturned crate. "They said it was a forgotten deity that protected those who respected the swamp. It offered safety to those who honored it with offerings." "What kind of offerings?" His eyes met mine. "What do you think, Ranger Washington?" A chill ran through me as I remembered the figure dragging something heavy toward that sinkhole. "The stories say it only emerges in times of great change," Gabriel continued. "When the balance of the swamp is threatened, like during a severe drought," he nodded. "Or when men try to change the flow of the waters." As I drove back to headquarters, Gabriel's warning echoed in my mind. Something was out there in the water, something that didn't want to be found. And if the old stories were true, it was only going to get hungrier. Back at headquarters, I couldn't stop thinking about what Gabriel had told me. Le Roi des Marais, the king of the swamp. I'd always been a man of science, believing what I could see and touch, but what I'd glimpsed in the darkness went beyond anything I could easily explain. I spread out my evidence on my desk. The plaster, casts of the huge footprints, photos of the damaged airboat, the black substance I'd collected, now sealed in a jar, and my notes about the water levels. Putting it all together, a picture was starting to form, one that both fascinated and terrified me. "You've been avoiding me," Diane said, appearing in my doorway. "Find something you don't want to share?" I hesitated, then waved her in. Close, the door. I told her everything, what I'd seen in the swamp, my conversation with Gabriel, and the connections I was piecing together. I expected her to laugh, to tell me I was letting my imagination run wild. Instead, she studied my evidence carefully. "So what exactly are we looking for?" she finally asked. "I don't know for sure, but based on the tracks and what I saw," I took a deep breath. "It's big, maybe 10 feet tall when standing straight. Amphibious, with webbed feet. It can move through water almost silently. And the black substance. I think it's some kind of secretion from its skin, like a giant bipedal frog." There was no mockery in her voice, just professional curiosity. More like, "Have you heard of the skunk ape?" "Florida's version of Bigfoot," she nodded, "but aquatic. Locals have reported sightings for decades. What if there's some truth to it? What if it's not just one creature, but a species that's adapted to live in the deepest parts of the Everglades?" Diane picked up the jar with the black substance. "We should get this analyzed. If it's biological, it might tell us more about what we're dealing with." Before I could respond, the radio on my desk crackled to life. Sheriff Pickman and 2 of his deputies had gone missing while on patrol. Their truck had been found abandoned near an old poaching trail, but there was no sign of the men. "They were setting up alligator traps," the dispatcher said. "Illegal ones, off the books." My eyes met Diane's. "We'll check it out," I replied. The scene at the deputy's truck was disturbing. The doors were open, the keys still in the ignition. Their gear was scattered around as if they'd been in the middle of unloading when something interrupted them. I found Pickman's badge stuck in the bark of a cypress tree, 15 feet off the ground. "Leroy," Diane called, her voice tight. "Look at this." She was standing by the edge of the water, pointing to more of those 3-toed tracks. But there was something else. Drag marks leading into the water and splashes of the same black substance I'd found before. "It took them," I said quietly. "All 3 of them." We followed the tracks along the bank until they disappeared into a deeper channel. While we were examining the area, a strange smell hit me, musky and strong, like rotten eggs mixed with something sweet and sickly. "Do you smell that?" I asked. Diane nodded, covering her nose. "What is it?" "I think it's from the same creature. Gabriel mentioned something." I tried to remember his exact words. He said the old stories claimed the creature could make people follow it willingly into the water. "How?" "I'm not sure, but what if it's some kind of chemical, something that affects the brain, makes people hallucinate or become suggestible?" We took more samples and headed back, both of us quiet, lost in our own thoughts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the pattern of the disappearances. If this creature was real, why these specific people? Why now, during this drought? I drove back to the ranger station early the next morning and started pulling files on all the victims. 3 hours later, I found the connection. When Diane arrived, I was surrounded by papers and maps. "I know why it's taking these specific people," I said without preamble. "Why?" "The Cooper family. Mr. Cooper worked for a development company that's been lobbying to drain parts of the Everglades for a new housing project. The missing tourists. They were part of an off-road vehicle club that's been fighting the park's restrictions on ATVs. And Pickman? He's been taking bribes from poachers for years, letting them hunt protected species. Diane stared at the files. You're saying this creature is targeting people who've hurt the park? It sounds crazy, I know, but look at the evidence. She sat down slowly. So, what do we do? How do we stop it? I'm not sure we should, I admitted. Maybe it's just defending its home. Leroy, it's killing people. I know. I rubbed my eyes. We need to find its lair. That might tell us more about what we're dealing with. Based on the pattern of sightings and disappearances, we determined the creature must be using underwater passages to move around. The park, many of the sinkholes in the Everglades, connected to vast underground cave systems. The next day, we took diving gear to the sinkhole where I'd seen the creature. The water was dark and murky, visibility limited to just a few feet. We descended, slowly, our flashlights cutting weak paths through the gloom. About 30 feet down, we found an opening in the limestone, an underwater tunnel large enough for a person to swim through, or something much bigger. We followed it, the narrow passage occasionally opening into wider chambers. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, twisting through the rock. Just as my air gauge was warning me we needed to turn back, the tunnel opened into a massive cavern with a pocket of air at the top. We surfaced in darkness, the beams of our flashlights revealing a horrifying sight. The cavern was filled with human remains. Not just recent ones, there were bones, clothing, and personal items that looked decades old. Some appeared to date, back to the Civil War based on the deteriorated uniforms and equipment visible. My God, Diane whispered, her voice echoing in the chamber. It's been here a long time, I said, using this place to store its victims. As we explored the cavern, we found something else. Fresh claw marks on the walls, and nests made of vegetation, bones, and mud. The strong, musky smell was overwhelming here. Look at this, Diane called, shining her light on a section of wall. What I saw sent a shiver down my spine. Crude drawings covered the rock face, images of a tall, humanoid figure with long arms and webbed hands. Some showed it dragging people into the water, others depicted people kneeling before it, offering what looked like sacrifices. It's intelligent, I said, maybe even worshipped at some point. A splash from deeper in the cavern made us both freeze. Something was moving in the water, heading our way. We need to go, I whispered. Now. We swam back through the tunnel as fast as we could, that feeling of being hunted pushing us forward. I couldn't shake the certainty that yellow eyes were watching from the darkness behind us. When we finally reached the sinkhole and climbed out onto solid ground, we were both shaking, not just from the cold water, but from what we'd discovered. We need a plan, Diane said as we loaded our gear into the truck. We need to stop this thing before it kills again. I nodded, though a part of me wondered if we were making a terrible mistake. The skunk ape, or Le Roi des Marais, or whatever it was, had been here long before us. Maybe it had more right to the Everglades than we did, but I couldn't stand by and let more people die, no matter what they might have done to deserve the creature's wrath. I think I know how we might be able to trap it, I said, starting the engine, but it's going to be dangerous. Little did I know just how dangerous it would turn out to be, not just because of the creature, but because of the secrets some people would kill to protect. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. I pored over maps of the Everglades, tracking water levels, sinkhole locations, and every reported sighting of unusual activity. Somewhere in this data was the key to finding and stopping the creature. One evening, as a thunderstorm rolled in from the Gulf, Diane and I were testing different equipment in the ranger station garage. I've been thinking about the creature's behavior, I said, connecting wires to a car battery. It avoids boats with running motors and seems to stay away from power lines that cross the water. You think it's sensitive to electricity? Diane asked, handing me a pair of pliers. It would make sense for something that lives mostly underwater. Many aquatic animals can detect electrical fields. Sharks, eels, even some amphibians. I finished wiring a crude electrical prod. Nothing that could kill, but enough to create a strong field in the water. "So what's the plan?" she asked. "Electrify the water and drive it somewhere we can capture it?" "Something like that. I've mapped out a channel that narrows to a choke point. If we can herd it there using electrical deterrents, we might be able to trap it long enough to tranquilize it. And then what? Turn it over to scientists, lock it in a zoo." There was an edge to her voice I couldn't quite place. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "First we have to find it and stop it from killing more people." Thunder boomed overhead, rattling the windows. The storm was getting closer. "We should wait until the weather clears," I said, looking outside at the darkening sky. "No, this is perfect," Diane insisted. "The storm will mask our movements. And I've noticed the creature seems more active during bad weather. Maybe it uses the noise as cover." I wasn't convinced, but she was right about one thing. We were running out of time. Another new moon was coming, and with it, the likelihood of more disappearances. We loaded our equipment into an airboat, the electrical prods, tranquilizer guns, nets and spotlights. The rain was starting to fall as we headed out, fat drops hammering the metal of the boat. The plan was to patrol the area where I'd first seen the creature, near Crooked Channel. As we navigated through the rain-lashed swamp, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Lightning flashed across the sky, briefly illuminating the twisted shapes of cypress trees and the dark water around us. "This is crazy," I shouted over the storm. "We should go back." Diane gestured for me to cut the engine. As the airboat drifted to a stop, she leaned forward. "Listen." At first, all I could hear was the drumming of rain and distant thunder. Then I caught it, a heavy splashing, different from the rainfall, moving parallel to our position. I flicked on the spotlight, sweeping its beam across the water. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of something large moving through the channel, about 50 yards away. A hunched, massive shape, with what looked like moss or hair hanging from its body. "There!" Diane aimed the tranquilizer rifle, but the creature submerged before she could get a clear shot. We started the engine again and followed, keeping the spotlight trained on the water. The creature stayed just ahead of us, surfacing occasionally to breathe before diving again. "It's leading us somewhere," I realized, watching its pattern. "Stay alert!" Lightning struck a nearby tree with a deafening crack, briefly turning night into day. In that instant, I saw our surroundings clearly and realized we'd been herded into a narrow, dead-end channel. "Back up!" I shouted, turning the airboat around. "It's trapped us!" As I gunned the engine, something massive hit the underside of the boat, nearly capsizing us. Diane fell against the side, dropping the rifle into the water. "The prods!" I yelled, reaching for one of the electrical devices. "Get them ready!" Another blow rocked the boat. Water sloshed over the sides as the creature circled us, hidden beneath the surface. I jabbed the electrical prod into the water just as a huge webbed hand reached up to grab the side of the boat. There was a sharp, crackling sound and a high-pitched shriek that cut through the storm noise. The hand disappeared. It worked! Diane grabbed another prod and stood ready at the opposite side. I steered the boat back toward the main channel, moving slowly, using the prods to keep the creature at bay. We were almost to safety when lightning struck again, this time hitting something in the water nearby. The electrical surge traveled through the water and into our equipment. Sparks flew from the battery and the prods went dead in our hands. No, no, no! I frantically tried to restart the engine, but it was fried. In the sudden silence, we heard it. A heavy breathing sound, getting closer. Something bumped the boat from below, more gently this time, almost curious. "Don't move," I whispered to Diane, reaching slowly for my sidearm. The creature surfaced about 10 feet away, and for the first time, I saw it clearly in the beam of our remaining spotlight. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall from the waterline, with broad shoulders and a hunched posture. Its skin was a mottled greenish-brown, covered in patches of moss and algae that hung like hair from its arms and back. The three-fingered hands ended in long, curved claws. But its face was the most unsettling part. A broad, flat head with a wide mouth full of small, sharp teeth and those glowing yellow eyes, intelligent and ancient. For a long moment, it simply watched us, water streaming from its body in the pouring rain. Then it began to move toward the boat. "Leroy," Diane said, quietly, "I'm sorry." Before I could ask what she meant, she pulled out a revolver and fired, not at the creature, but at the spotlight, plunging us into darkness. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying to find her in the dark. "Something I should have done weeks ago," she replied, her voice suddenly cold. "You were right about one thing, Leroy. The creature is intelligent, and it can be reasoned with." Lightning flashed again, and I saw her standing at the edge of the boat, the revolver now pointed at me. "You're working with the developers," I said, the pieces finally falling into place. "The ones who want to drain the Everglades," she nodded. "Sunset Acres. They hired me to infiltrate the Park Service, to learn the land and find ways around the environmental protections. And the creature? A complication at first, but now an opportunity. Can you imagine how much people would pay to see something like this? A living prehistoric specimen? The development plans are just the beginning." The boat rocked as the creature moved closer, circling us in the darkness. "It'll kill you," I warned. "It knows what you're planning to do to its home. Not if I give it what it wants." She gestured toward me with the gun. "A sacrifice, just like the old stories." I lunged for her, but she was ready. The gun went off, the bullet grazing my shoulder. I fell back, clutching the wound as pain seared through me. "Nothing personal, Leroy," she said. "You're a good ranger, just on the wrong side of progress." As she aimed for a killing shot, the boat suddenly tilted violently. A massive webbed hand clamped onto the side, inches from where Diane stood. She screamed, firing wildly into the darkness. The creature rose from the water beside her, its yellow eyes glowing in the night. In one swift motion, it wrapped its long arms around her and pulled her overboard. Her scream cut off abruptly as they disappeared beneath the surface. Bubbles rose for a few seconds, then nothing. I sat in the drifting boat, bleeding and in shock, as the storm raged around me. In the distance, I heard Gabriel's airboat before I saw it, its spotlight sweeping the water. "Leroy," he called. "Where are you? Here!" I waved my good arm, wincing at the pain. "Over here!" As he pulled alongside and helped me into his boat, I looked back at the dark water. There was no sign of Diane or the creature, just rain falling. On the empty surface, I heard gunshots, Gabriel said, binding my wounded shoulder with a cloth. "What happened?" I shook my head, not sure where to begin. "Diane. She was working for the developers. She tried to kill me. And the creature. It took her," I said simply. "Dragged her underwater." Gabriel nodded gravely. "Le roi des marais judges those who would harm the swamp. It has always been this way." As we headed back to dry land, I couldn't help but wonder if the creature had saved me intentionally, or if I had simply not been its target. Either way, I now understood that this wasn't just about stopping a monster, it was about understanding its purpose. 3 days after Diane's disappearance, I was back at headquarters, my shoulder bandaged and my mind racing with questions. The official story was that Ranger Mackenzie had been lost in a boating accident during the storm. Sheriff Pickman and his deputies were still listed as missing. No one mentioned a creature. I sat at my desk, staring at the map of the Everglades. Something about the water levels had been bothering me. Even with the drought, certain areas were dropping faster than others, forming a pattern I couldn't quite make sense of. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. A nurse from the county hospital stood there with a familiar little girl at her side. Lily Cooper, I said, surprised. She insisted on seeing you, the nurse explained. She's been having nightmares, drawing the same pictures over and over. The doctor thought talking to you might help since you found her. Lily stepped forward, clutching a folder of drawings. Her eyes seemed older somehow, carrying a weight no child should bear. I'll leave you two for a bit, the nurse said, stepping outside. How are you doing, Lily? I asked gently. He shows me things, she whispered, her voice small but steady. When I sleep, he shows me the water under the ground. A chill ran through me. Who shows you things, Lily? The tall man from the water. He's old, Ranger Washington. Older than the trees, and he's scared. What's he scared of? She opened her folder and spread out several drawings on my desk. They showed crude but detailed maps of the Everglades, with blue lines running beneath the surface, connecting different areas. The water is sick, she said, pointing to red spots she'd drawn over certain areas. Bad people are making it sick. They want to make it go away. I looked closer at her drawings, suddenly realizing what I was seeing. Lily, these are underground. Springs, aren't they? Natural aquifers that feed the Everglades, she nodded. The tall man protects them. That's his job. Has been since forever. I compared her drawings to my maps. The areas with rapidly dropping water levels perfectly matched the locations she had, marked with red. Places where the underground water sources were apparently being damaged or diverted. Do you know what's happening to these springs? I asked. The bad people are putting things in the ground, big pipes that steal the water. She looked up at me with serious eyes. The tall man is angry about it, but he showed me that you're different. You'll help. After Lily left, I did some digging. Sure enough, Sunset Acres, the development company Diane had mentioned, had secretly begun installing drainage systems in several locations, disguising them as scientific research equipment. They were literally stealing water from beneath the Everglades, testing their drainage technology before beginning their main project. The creature, the thing I'd been hunting as a monster, was trying to protect the hidden springs that kept the Everglades alive during droughts. I knew what I had to do, but I needed help. I called Gabriel. We need to go back out there, I told him. Tonight, I think I understand now. As darkness fell, we took Gabriel's airboat to the largest of the sinkholes Lily had marked. The night was clear, the new moon providing almost no light. Perfect for what we needed to do. Are you sure about this? Gabriel asked as we cut the engine and drifted toward the center of the pool. No, I admitted, but it's the only way to stop this from happening again. I had brought no weapons, no traps, no electrical prods. Just a lantern and some maps showing the locations of the illegal drainage equipment. It can sense our intentions, Gabriel reminded me. If you try to trick it, I'm not tricking anyone, I cut in. I'm here to make a deal. We sat in silence. For nearly an hour, the only sounds the occasional splash of fish and the distant call of night birds. Then we heard it, a subtle change in the water's movement, a presence beneath the surface. It's here, Gabriel whispered. The creature rose slowly from the water about 20 feet from our boat, just its eyes and the top of its head visible. Those yellow eyes watched us warily, glowing faintly in the darkness. I know what you are, I called out, my voice steady despite my racing heart. And I know what you're protecting. I held up the lantern, illuminating the maps I'd brought. The springs beneath the swamp, the lifeblood of the Everglades. The creature moved closer, more of its massive form becoming visible. In the lantern, light. I could see patterns on its skin, markings that looked almost deliberate, like ancient symbols etched into its hide. People are trying to drain the water, I continued. They want to build houses here, pave over the swamp. But I can help stop them if you'll stop killing. The creature tilted its head, regarding me with eyes that reflected a disturbing intelligence. Suddenly, Lily's small voice spoke from behind me. He wants to know why he should trust you. I spun around. Lily was sitting in the back of the airboat, her legs dangling over the side. "Lily!" Gabriel gasped. "How did you get here?" "I followed you," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He told me to come." I looked from her to the creature, understanding dawning. "You can talk to it?" She nodded. "Not with words, with pictures in my head." I turned back to the creature. "I'm not like the others. I want to protect the Everglades, just like you do. There are laws, human laws, that can help us do that, but you have to stop killing people." Through Lily, the creature and I made a pact. I would use my position as a ranger to expose Sunset Acres' illegal activities and protect the hidden springs. In return, Le Roi des Marais would retreat deeper into the park, away from humans. The next morning, I led a team of federal environmental agents to the drainage sites. The evidence was clear. Sunset Acres had violated numerous environmental laws. Their project was shut down, their permits revoked. When they asked how I'd discovered the hidden equipment, I simply said I'd noticed unusual water patterns during my patrols. No one questioned it too deeply. They were just happy to have caught the company red-handed. Over the next few years, I rose through the ranks, eventually becoming head ranger of Everglades National Park. I dedicated my career to protecting the fragile ecosystem, always keeping my promise to the ancient guardian that lived in its depths. Lily Cooper was adopted by a local family who lived on the edge of the park. I checked on her regularly, watching as she grew into a confident young woman with an uncanny connection to the swamp. Sometimes she'd tell me things, where poachers were hiding, which areas needed protection, always with that knowing look in her eyes. The disappearances stopped. Occasionally, tourists would report seeing something large moving through the water at dusk, or hearing strange calls in the night, but no one was ever harmed. The creature had kept its side of the bargain. 10 years passed. I was 43 now, with grey starting to appear in my hair. Another severe drought hit the Everglades in the summer of 1982. Water levels dropped to record lows, exposing areas that hadn't been dry in decades. One evening, I was patrolling a remote section of the park when I noticed something odd. The water in a particular channel wasn't dropping like it should have been. In fact, it seemed to be rising slightly, defying the drought conditions everywhere else. I remembered Lily's drawings from years ago, the blue lines showing underground connections. This area must be linked to one of the hidden springs. As darkness fell, I decided to investigate on foot, following the channel to its source. The swamp was quiet around me, unnaturally so. No insects chirping, no frogs calling, just silence. I found the spring just as the last light faded, a small pool nestled among cypress knees, its water clear and pristine despite the muddy conditions everywhere else. As I knelt to examine it, I felt rather than heard someone approach. "You've done well, Ranger Washington." I turned to find a tall, thin man standing at the edge of the trees. His face was weathered, his eyes reflecting the starlight with an unnatural gleam. It took me a moment to recognize him. "Lily's father?" I asked, confused. Mr. Cooper had been one of the first victims 10 years ago. He smiled, but the expression wasn't quite right on his face, as if he wasn't used to forming it. In a manner of speaking, understanding dawned slowly. "You're him, the king of the swamp. We have many shapes," he said, his voice carrying echoes of water rushing through underground caves. "This one lets us walk among your kind when necessary." "Why show yourself now?" I asked, fighting the urge to back away. "Because the waters are threatened again. Not by builders this time, but by something larger. The rains fail. The climate shifts." He gestured to the spring. "This is one of the last pure sources. What do you want me to do?" "Join us," he said simply. "Become a guardian, as we are. The swamp needs protectors who understand both worlds." I thought about my life, about the years I'd spent protecting this wilderness. What would really change? I was already dedicated to the Everglades. What would that mean exactly? I asked cautiously. A longer life, different eyes to see with, the knowledge of water and root and stone. He extended a hand that seemed too long, the fingers slightly webbed in the starlight. But the same purpose you have always served. I hesitated, then took his hand. His skin felt cool and smooth, not quite human. The choice must be willing, he said, and there is no return. I thought about the rangers who would come after me, the developers who would never stop trying to drain and build. The Everglades would always need defenders. I'm willing, I said. 3 days later, my empty Jeep was found parked near a trail. Search parties combed the area for weeks. They found my badge beside a pool of water next to what appeared to be massive, three-toed footprints in the mud. But what no one noticed were the second set of tracks leading away from the scene. Smaller, human-looking prints that gradually changed, becoming longer, wider, with the suggestion of webbing between the toes. They say on nights when the moon is new and the water is high, rangers sometimes glimpse two figures moving through. The swamp, one massive and ancient, the other newer, but just as purposeful. They patrol the hidden springs, guardians of the Everglades' deepest secrets, and if you find yourself alone in the swamp, far from the tourist trails, remember to treat the water with respect, because the king of the swamp is watching, and now he's not watching alone. Rain pounded on the roof of my government-issued Jeep as I pulled up to the ranger station. Lightning flashed, showing me glimpses of the small wooden building that would be my home for who knows how long. The wipers couldn't keep up with the downpour, and I sat for a minute, listening to the thunder rolling through the mountains. My name is Victor Thornton. I'm 43 years old, and until 3 weeks ago I was head ranger at Yellowstone. Now I'm here, hidden away in the Smoky Mountains because I lost my temper with a tourist who let his kid feed a bear cub. The higher-ups called it an incident. Call it doing my job. I grabbed my duffel bag and made a run for the porch, getting soaked in the process. The key stuck in the lock, and when I finally got the door open, musty air hit my face. It smelled like nobody had been here for weeks. I found the light switch and looked around. A desk covered in papers, a radio, a small kitchen with a coffee. A pot still half full of something that now looked like tar. A bedroom in the back with an unmade bed. "Hello, Ranger Dawson," I called out, knowing I wouldn't get an answer. The transfer papers said the previous ranger had vacated his post unexpectedly. Great. I dropped my bag and started looking through the papers on the desk. Most were routine reports about trail conditions and campsite permits. But in the desk drawer, I found a personal journal. The last entry caught my eye. 3 nights now. The voices between the trees. They know my name, that was it. No explanation. Just that one line written in shaky handwriting, dated 3 weeks ago. I was still reading when a knock at the door made me jump. Standing there, completely soaked, was a young man in a ranger uniform that looked 2 sizes too big. "Ranger Thornton, I'm Matthew Hayes. I heard you were arriving tonight." His face lit up with a smile so bright it was almost blinding. "It's an honor to meet you, sir. I've read about your work at Yellowstone. Great. A fan. Come in, Hayes. You're dripping all over my porch." He stepped inside, shaking like a wet puppy. "Sorry I wasn't here when you arrived. I was checking on the Campbell Creek Trail after the storm started." "Any problems?" I asked, falling into work mode automatically. "No, sir, all clear. But," he hesitated, "there's something you should know. We've had 3 hikers go missing in the past month. That got my attention." "Bears?" "That's the official story. But no bodies, no blood, no torn backpacks. They just vanished." Before I could ask more questions, another knock came at the door. This time it was a woman in her late 30s, wearing a rain jacket over practical clothes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she had the look of someone who didn't waste time on nonsense. "Dr. Porter," Hayes said, This is Ranger Thornton, the new head ranger. She gave me a quick once-over. Victor Thornton. I heard about what happened at Yellowstone. Word travels fast, I said. Small community. She took off her jacket. I'm Amelia Porter, regional wildlife biologist. I've been studying a series of unusual deer deaths in the area. Unusual how? I asked. The bodies are completely drained of blood, but there are no predator marks. No wounds at all, in fact. She looked me straight in the eye. Something's not. Right in these woods, Ranger Thornton. That night after Hayes and Porter left, I sat at the desk looking through Dawson's journal. Most entries were normal, weather reports, wildlife sightings. But about 6 weeks ago, they changed. He wrote about cold spots on the trails, about feeling watched, about dreams where he was lost in the woods, following voices that sounded like his dead wife. I closed the journal and looked out the window at the dark trees. The rain had stopped, but the forest was still dripping. In the distance, something howled. Not quite a wolf, not quite anything I'd ever heard before. I'd been in these mountains less than a day, and already I could feel it. Something wasn't right here. And whether I wanted it or not, it was now my problem. I woke up early the next morning to someone banging on the door. When I opened it, I found an old man with a white beard and overalls. He smelled like moonshine and hadn't bathed in a while. You the new ranger? He asked, looking me up and down. That's right. Victor Thornton. He spat on the ground. Jenkins. Folks call me Old Man Jenkins. He leaned in closer. You best be careful up here, Ranger. They're active again. They, the skin stealers. They take your face, wear it like a mask. He tapped his temple. Have been happening every 50 years like clockwork. Nobody believes old Jenkins, but I seen him out there in the deep woods where the sun don't touch the ground. I sighed. Every park had its local character with wild stories. Thanks for the warning, Mr. Jenkins. Don't thank me. Just stay out of the north woods when the moon is full. He turned to leave, then stopped. And if you hear voices that sound like people you know, run the other way. As he shuffled off, Hayes pulled up in his Jeep. I see you met Jenkins, he said with a smile. Don't mind him, he's been telling those stories for years. What's his deal? I asked as we got in the Jeep for my first patrol. Lives alone in a cabin about 3 miles from here, makes moonshine, mostly keeps to himself. Hayes started the engine. Some say he used to be a ranger here back in the 40s, but no one knows for sure. As we drove down the muddy road, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jenkins's warning wasn't just the ramblings of a drunk old man. Between his skin stealers and Dawson's voices between the trees, something had these people spooked. And deep down, where the memories of Korea still lived, I knew what it felt like when danger was real. The next morning, Hayes and I headed out to check the area where the last hiker had disappeared. The trail wound through thick trees, with the morning fog still hanging low. The air felt heavy and wet in my lungs. What was the hiker's name? I asked as we walked. Melissa Chen, 26 years old, experienced hiker from Knoxville, Hayes said. She was supposed to meet friends at the Laurel Falls campsite but never showed up. We reached a fork in the trail, and I noticed something odd. The ground was soft from yesterday's rain, perfect for tracking, but there were prints I'd never seen before. They looked almost like deer tracks, but wrong somehow. The shape was off, and they seemed to have thumbs. I knelt down for a closer look. Hayes, ever seen tracks like these? He shook his head, eyes wide. Never. What kind of animal makes prints like that? I don't know. I stood up slowly, scanning the trees. That's when I noticed the carvings. Faint symbols cut into the bark of several trees, forming a kind of circle around the trail fork. They weren't fresh cuts. The edges had darkened with age. Those weren't here yesterday, Hayes whispered. You sure? Positive. I patrolled this exact spot. Those trees were normal. A chill ran up my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. I took a few photos with my camera, trying to stay calm. Let's keep moving. As we walked deeper into the woods, the trees grew thicker, blocking out more of the sky. Birds fell silent as we passed. Even the usual sounds of squirrels and other small animals were missing. The forest felt dead. "Sir," Hayes said suddenly, pointing ahead. "Look at that." About 20 feet off the trail, half hidden under some ferns, was a bright red backpack. We approached carefully, and I used a stick to pull back the covering plants. "That's Chen's pack," Hayes said. Her friends described it. I carefully opened the main compartment. Inside was typical hiking gear: water bottle, protein bars, first aid kit, and a small leather-bound journal. I flipped it open to the last entries. Day 3 on the trail. Something followed me all day. Never saw it, but I could hear it moving through the trees when I stopped. Day 4. Bad dreams. Saw antlers in the mist outside my tent. Told myself it was just branches. Day 5. The whispers started. They sound like my mum, but she's been dead for 4 years. They know things only she would know. I'm not sleeping tonight. The final entry was just one line. It's standing right outside my tent. Hayes looked pale. "Sir, what does this mean?" I closed the journal and put it in my pocket. "It means we need to talk to Dr. Porter." Back at the station, I spread out a map of the park and marked the spots where the 3 hikers had disappeared. Dr. Porter watched over my shoulder. "That can't be a coincidence," she said quietly. "The 3 points formed a perfect triangle across the park, or part of one at least." "If this is some kind of pattern," I said, "where would the next 2 points be?" Porter took the pencil and extended the lines, creating a perfect 5-pointed star across the map. "Here," she said, marking 2 more spots. "And here." Hayes looked at the map with wide eyes. "The second spot you marked, that's where Jenkins' cabin is." A radio call came in before we could discuss it further. Another missing hiker, a college student named Brad Williams. Last seen heading toward... I felt my stomach drop. The exact location of one of Porter's predicted points. "I'm going out there," I said, grabbing my gear. "I'll come with you," Hayes volunteered. "No. Stay here with Dr. Porter. Check the records. See if there's any pattern to when these disappearances happen." "But, sir..." "That's an order, Hayes." I headed out alone, driving as far as I could before continuing on foot. The sun was starting to set, painting the mountains gold and red. Beautiful, if you weren't looking for a missing person. As darkness fell, I switched on my flashlight. The woods at night were different, alive with shadows that seemed to move on their own. I followed the trail toward the location where Williams was last seen. That's when I heard it. My name, Victor, whispered so softly I almost missed. Yet I spun around, shining my light between the trees. "Who's there?" "Nothing, just empty forest." Then again from a different direction. "Victor, help us." The voice, I knew that voice. Sergeant Miller, who died in my arms in Korea, but that was impossible. Miller. My voice cracked. "Over here, Captain, we're trapped." I knew it couldn't be real. Miller was dead, along with Peterson and Rodriguez and all the others. But the voice was so clear, so perfect. "Show yourself," I shouted, my hand going to the pistol at my hip. Silence, then whispers from all around, overlapping. My men, calling for help, begging me to save them. I started running, no longer caring about the trail. The voices followed, always just out of sight. I ran until my lungs burned, until I burst into a small clearing and stopped dead in my tracks, hanging. From the branches of the trees, like grotesque flags, were pieces of ranger uniforms. Shredded, stained with what looked like dried blood. And pinned to one, I recognized it immediately, was the name badge of Ranger Dawson, my missing predecessor. I grabbed the badge with shaking hands. The metal was ice cold, colder than it should be on a summer night. The voices had stopped. The forest was completely silent now, watching me, waiting. I made it back to my jeep and drove straight to the station. Dr. Porter was still there, surrounded by old books and papers. "The Cherokee have stories," she said without looking up when I walked in, "about a creature they called the deer that walks like man. It appears every 50 years to claim human vessels." "What does that mean?" I asked, showing her Dawson's badge. She looked at it, then at me with worried eyes. "It means we're dealing with something that's been here a lot longer than we have, Ranger Thornton. Something that's getting ready to feed again." The next morning, dark clouds hung over the mountains like a warning. Dr. Porter spread old books and papers across my desk as rain tapped against the windows. "According to these Cherokee records," she said, pointing to yellowed pages, "the creature is something like what white settlers later called a Wendigo, but it's older, much older." "What exactly are we talking about here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Some kind of animal?" Porter shook her head. "Not an animal, not anymore." She pushed a rough sketch toward me. This was drawn by a Cherokee elder in 1908. The drawing showed a tall, skinny figure standing on two legs. Its body looked human-like, but wrong. Too thin, limbs too long. Worst was its head. A deer skull with massive antlers, but with human eyes peering from the empty sockets. "The stories say it was once a man," Porter continued. "A settler who got lost in these mountains during winter, made some kind of deal with something dark, gained the ability to survive by taking the form and strength of others. I thought about the strange footprints, the voices of dead men, the missing hikers. How do we stop it?" I asked. Before she could answer, Hayes burst through the door, soaking, wet and out of breath. "Sir, I heard a child crying out on Blackberry Trail. I called for backup on the radio but couldn't wait. His eyes were wide, scared. I found a little girl's shoe, sir. There aren't any kids reported missing." My stomach dropped. "Hayes, where exactly were you?" He pointed to our map, right at one of the marked points in the star pattern. "I'm going back out there," he said. "That child could be—" "There is no child, Hayes." I grabbed his shoulders. "Listen to me. It's a trick. Whatever's out there, it mimics voices to lure people in. But I heard my dead war buddies last night, clear as day. It wasn't real." Hayes stared at me, struggling to process what I was saying. Then his radio crackled to life. "Help, please." A child's voice, breaking up with static. "I'm scared." Before I could stop him, Hayes pulled away. "I have to check, just to be sure." "Hayes! Matt! Wait!" But he was already out the door, back, into the rain. I grabbed my gear and ran after him, but his jeep was already disappearing down the muddy road. Porter caught up to me on the porch. "He's heading right for it." "I know. Get in." I jumped into my jeep with Porter beside me and we took off after Hayes. We followed his tire tracks until they ended at a trailhead. From there, we had to continue on foot, calling his name every few minutes. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the trees, making it sound like footsteps all around us. 2 hours later, we found his hat lying in the mud. Beside it was a trail of blood drops leading deeper into the woods, where the trees grew so thick they blocked out most of the daylight. "We should go back, get help," Porter suggested, voice shaking. "There's no time." I checked my gun, making sure it was loaded. "But you should head back to the station. I'm staying with you." Her face was pale, but determined. Two have a better chance than one. We followed the blood trail as it wound through the trees. The drops got bigger, then turned into smears like something was being dragged. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, not even wind in the leaves. Then I saw it, just for a second between the trees. Tall, impossibly tall, with a head crowned by massive antlers. It moved like nothing I'd ever seen, gliding rather than walking. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Porter nodded, too scared to speak. The blood trail led us to the base of a hill covered in old stones. Cherokee burial ground, according to the markings. At the center was an opening. A cave entrance partially hidden by hanging vines. Cold air flowed out of the cave, much colder than it should be in summer. The blood trail led straight inside. Hayes could still be alive, I said, switching on my flashlight. Thornton, Porter grabbed my arm. Those stories, they say the creature keeps its victims alive for days, keeps them fresh. I tried not to think about what that meant as we entered the cave. The beam of my flashlight seemed swallowed by the darkness, barely showing the way ahead. The cave floor sloped downward, taking us deeper underground. The cold got worse as we descended. Our breath came out in white clouds. The walls were wet, covered in a slick layer of ice that shouldn't be possible in this season. Then the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and my light fell on something that made my blood freeze. Bodies hung from the ceiling like meat in a butcher's shop. 3 of them had to be the missing hikers. They were pale, partially eaten, but somehow preserved by the unnatural cold. And at the far end of the chamber, slumped against the wall, was Hayes. "Matt!" I rushed to him, checking for a pulse. His skin was ice cold, but there was a faint heartbeat. "He's alive. Help me get him down." As Porter hurried over, Hayes's eyes fluttered open. They were glazed, unfocused. "It touched me," he whispered. "I can see everything now." "Save your strength," I said, working to untie the ropes holding him. "We're getting you out of here." "No, listen." His voice was urgent despite his weakness. "When it touches you, you see what it sees. It's been here so long, hundreds of years." Porter helped me get Hayes to his feet. He could barely stand. "There's more," Hayes continued, his voice getting weaker. "It's not just killing for food, it's choosing, looking for a new vessel." "What do you mean?" Porter asked. "The old body is wearing out. It needs someone strong, someone who can hear the voices and not go mad." Hayes looked directly at me. "Someone like you, Captain." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cave's cold. How did Hayes know they called me Captain in Korea? I'd never told him before I could ask. A terrible sound echoed through the cave, somewhere between a deer's call and a human scream. And it was getting closer. "We need to move. Now." I pulled Hayes's arm over my shoulder, and Porter took his other side. We started back toward the tunnel entrance. We'd barely made it halfway when the temperature dropped even further. Ice crystals formed on our clothes, in our hair. Our flashlight beams caught movement at the tunnel entrance, a shadow that seemed to unfold itself, rising to an impossible height. Into the chamber stepped the creature from the Cherokee drawing. The Wendigo. Its body was human-like, but wrong in every way. Skin pulled too tight over elongated bones, ribcage visible, fingers ending in black claws, and its head, a deer skull with massive antlers, but the eye sockets weren't empty. They held glowing yellow eyes that fixed directly on me. It knew my name, it knew everything about me, and it was here to claim what it had chosen. "Run!" I shouted, pushing Porter and Hayes toward a narrow side tunnel. The creature moved with impossible speed, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Its clawed hand swiped at me, missing by inches as I dove after the others. The side tunnel was tight, forcing us to move in single file. Hayes stumbled, barely conscious. "Keep going," I said, taking up the rear. "Don't look back." Behind us, the Wendigo made a sound like branches breaking. It was too tall for the tunnel, forced to crawl on all fours. But it was coming. I could hear its claws scraping on stone. The tunnel suddenly opened into another chamber, smaller than the first, but with a crack in the ceiling that let in a thin beam of daylight. Water dripped from above, forming a small pool in the center. "There's no way out," Porter said, her voice shaking. I looked around desperately. She was right. The chamber was a dead end. "Help me with Hayes," I said, propping him against the wall. His breathing was shallow, skin colder than before. "Thornton," he whispered, grabbing my sleeve. "The old Cherokee man at the trading post. He knows how to fight it." I knew the place, a small tourist shop just outside the park that sold handmade Cherokee crafts. I'd passed it on my way in. The scraping sounds in the tunnel grew louder. We had minutes maybe seconds. "Porter, your lighter," I said, remembering. The silver Zippo I'd seen her use. She handed it over, and I flicked it on, holding the small flame toward the tunnel entrance. It wasn't much, but I remembered something from Porter's research. The creature feared fire. When I say go, you both head for that crack. I pointed to where the daylight came through. "It's tight, but you can make it." "What about you?" Porter asked. "I'll be right behind you." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but it was our only chance. Someone had to hold it off. The scraping stopped. Yellow eyes appeared in the darkness of the tunnel, watching us, waiting. "It's playing with us," Porter whispered. I raised the lighter higher. "Go now!" Porter pulled Hayes toward the crack, boosting him up to where light poured in. The creature remained still, watching me, only me. Then it spoke, using Hayes's voice. "It won't work, Captain. You can't save them all, just like Korea." My hand trembled. How did it know? How could it possibly know what happened there? "You're not real," I said through gritted teeth. "You're just a bad dream." It laughed then, a sound like dry leaves scraping together, and it stepped into the chamber, rising to its full height, antlers nearly touching the ceiling. "I am the oldest dream," it said, now using Dr. Porter's voice perfectly. "I was here before your kind built cities. I will be here when they fall." I backed up, keeping the flame between us. Porter had managed to push Hayes through the crack and was halfway up herself. The creature took another step forward. The lighter's flame suddenly grew, flaring up like a torch. The Wendigo hissed, backing away slightly. That's when I noticed something. The water on the ground reflected the flame, and the reflection seemed to hurt it too. Light. The creature hated light. "Hurry!" I called to Porter, who was struggling to pull herself up through the narrow opening. The Wendigo lunged suddenly, knocking the lighter from my hand. It skittered across the floor, flame extinguished. In the dim light from above, the creature looked even more terrible. A nightmare made real. It grabbed my throat with ice-cold hands, lifting me off the ground. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Its yellow eyes stared into mine, and suddenly I was somewhere else, seeing visions of snowy forests, of colonial settlements, of centuries passing like seconds. I saw what it had seen, felt what it had felt, the endless hunger, the loneliness, the cold that never ended. "Your body will serve me well," it whispered in my own voice. "Strong, resilient, perfect." From far away, I heard Porter scream my name. The creature's grip tightened, and darkness started closing in around my vision. Then a blinding flash of light filled the chamber. The Wendigo shrieked, dropping me to the ground. I gasped for air, looking up to see Old Man Jenkins standing in the tunnel entrance, holding a flaming torch. "Get away from him, you devil!" Jenkins shouted, waving the torch. The Wendigo backed away, shielding its eyes from the light. "I told you to stay out of the North Woods," Jenkins said to me, helping me to my feet. "Never listen, you Rangers. 50 years ago I made the same mistake." Understanding dawned on me. "You were a ranger here." He nodded. "Thomas Jenkins, head ranger, 1908. I've been fighting this thing for 50 years. The Wendigo was cornered, now pressed against the far wall of the chamber. But its yellow eyes showed no fear, only patience. It had all the time in the world. "How do we kill it?" I asked. Jenkins pulled something from his pocket, a small pouch. "Cherokee elder gave me these, symbols of protection." He tossed it to me. Inside were small stones carved with the same symbols I'd seen on the trees. "Make a circle," Jenkins instructed. "Quick, while the light holds it back." I scattered the stones in a circle around the creature. It watched me, perfectly still. "Now what?" I asked as I completed the circle. "Now we need a sacrifice," Jenkins said grimly. "Blood freely given." Before I could stop him, Jenkins stepped inside the circle with the Wendigo. The creature's eyes widened with what looked almost like fear. "Jenkins, no!" I reached for him, but it was too late. "I should have done this 50 years ago," he said. "Instead, I ran, hid, let it take others." He looked at me with clear eyes. No more. The Wendigo lunged at Jenkins, but the old man was ready. He thrust the torch directly into the creature's chest. There was a sound like ice cracking, and both Jenkins and the Wendigo burst into blinding white light. I shielded my eyes, feeling heat wash over me like a wave. When I could see again, both were gone. The carved stones had turned to ash. All that remained was Jenkins's ranger badge, lying in the center of the circle, untouched by the fire. I picked it up with shaking hands. The metal was warm now, not cold. "Thornton," Porter called from above. "Are you all right?" "It's over," I called back. "The creature's gone." But as I made my way toward the crack where daylight poured in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The visions I'd seen when the Wendigo touched me hadn't faded, and there was a strange tingling sensation at my temples that wouldn't go away. Whatever had happened in that cave, it wasn't really over. It had only changed. Fire spread quickly through the dry summer forest. By the time we got Hayes to safety, half the mountainside was ablaze. Rangers from neighboring districts came to help fight the flames. No one asked too many questions about what started it. They were just glad we'd made it out alive. Hayes spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain his condition, the strange cold that lingered in his body, the nightmares that made him scream in his sleep. But he was alive, and that was what mattered. Dr. Porter went back to her research, now focused on Cherokee legends and protection symbols. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me with a worried look, but she never said why. As for me, I stayed. Someone had to run the ranger station. And despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to leave these mountains. They had gotten under my skin in a way I couldn't explain. But things were different now. I could see things others couldn't. The first time it happened was at the hospital visiting Hayes. An old woman shuffled past his room, and around her floated a soft grey light. When I asked the nurse about her later, she looked at me strangely. "Mrs. Wilson, she passed away last night, Ranger Thornton. After that, I started noticing it everywhere. People surrounded by different colored lights, some bright and strong, others dim and fading. I began to understand what they meant. The bright ones had years ahead of them. The dim ones didn't. I never told anyone. Who would believe me? But I used it in my work. When hikers went off trail, I somehow knew which direction to search. When a storm was coming, I could feel it in my bones hours before the weather report. The park superintendent called it exceptional instinct. If only he knew. 6 months passed. The forest began to heal from the fire, new growth pushing up through the ashes. I patrolled daily, watching, waiting, though for what I wasn't sure. Then the reports started coming in. Tourists talking about seeing 2 rangers on the night patrol, one old, one young. But the logs showed I was the only one working those shifts. I never saw Jenkins's ghost, if that's what it was. But sometimes, when the wind blew just right through the trees, I could hear his voice warning me to stay vigilant. The nightmares came often. Dreams of running through snowy forests on 4 legs, of hunger so deep it burned. I'd wake up shaking, my room ice cold despite the summer heat. One morning, I noticed something while shaving. 2 small bumps on my temples, hidden by my hair. They were hard to the touch, like bone. Over the next few weeks, they grew slowly, and I took to wearing my ranger hat pulled low, even indoors. Dr. Porter visited occasionally, bringing books and research papers. We never talked about what happened in the cave, but she left protective symbols, carved stones, bundles of herbs around the station. I pretended not to notice. The Cherokee believe the Wendigo's spirit can transfer to a new host, she said, one evening trying to sound casual. If its physical form is destroyed, I kept my eyes on the report I was writing. That's so? They say you can tell by the cold that follows them, by their ability to see death before it comes. Her eyes were fixed on me. By the antlers that eventually grow. I finally looked up at her. "What exactly are you asking me, Dr. Porter?" You still you, Victor?" The question hung in the air between us. I thought about the changes I'd felt since that day in the cave, the visions, the cold that never quite left my bones, the growing bumps on my head. "Most days," I answered honestly, "and the days I'm not. I stay in the deep woods, away from people." She nodded slowly, then placed something on my desk, a small leather pouch. "Cherokee protection charms. Wear them. They help keep it dormant." I took the pouch, feeling its warmth against my cold fingers. Will it ever go away? I don't know. Her eyes were sad. "But Jenkins fought it for 50 years. Maybe you can too." After she left, I walked to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. In the mirror, in the dim light, my eyes seemed to have a yellowish tint. I pushed back my hair to reveal what I'd been hiding. The small antler nubs growing from my temples, now impossible to deny. The Wendigo wasn't gone. Part of it lived in me now. I could feel its hunger, its ancient knowledge, its cold patience. But I could also feel Jenkins's strength, his 50 years of resistance. This was my burden now, my battle. These mountains needed a protector who understood the danger lurking in the deep woods. Someone who could hear the whispers between the trees and know what they meant. I put my hat back on and stepped outside into the night. In the distance, something howled. Not quite a wolf, not quite anything. Natural. It was calling to the part of me that wasn't human anymore. But tonight, at least, I wouldn't answer. Tonight, I was still Victor Thornton, head ranger of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, guardian of the wilderness and the people who came to enjoy it. And if sometimes I patrolled with the ghost of an old ranger at my side, keeping watch over both the forest and me, well, that was just another secret of the Whispering Woods. My name is Margaret O'Donnell, but everyone calls me Meg. I used to shoot rifles in the Olympics before I became a park ranger. Now I work in the boundary waters of Minnesota, a place with thousands of lakes and tall pine trees that stretch as far as you can see. I came here after my divorce. I needed a fresh start after what happened at Yosemite, the breakdown, the panic attacks, the feeling that I couldn't trust my own mind anymore. My new boss, Ranger Paul Nakamura, doesn't know the whole story. He just knows I'm good at my job, even if I sometimes wake up screaming in the middle of the night. It was early June when I got the call about James Russell, a wildlife photographer who went into the woods 3 days ago and never came back out. His sister Emma called it in. She said he always checked in every night, no matter what. When he didn't call for 2 days straight, she knew something was wrong. "We'll find him," I promised her over the phone. I didn't tell her that after 48 hours in the wilderness, our chances weren't good. The next morning, I led the search party. Me, Paul, 2 local volunteers, and Emma herself, who refused to stay behind. She was shorter than me, with determined eyes that reminded me of my own sister. "He's alive," she kept saying. "I can feel it." We found his campsite that afternoon. That's when things started to get weird. The tent was still standing. His sleeping bag was laid out inside. His backpack sat by the fire pit with food still hanging in a bear bag from a nearby tree. But the strangest thing was his camera equipment. Set up on a tripod, pointing at an empty clearing, like he'd been planning to take a picture of nothing. "This doesn't make sense," Paul said, examining the scene. "No signs of animal attack, no signs of a struggle. It's like he just walked away." Emma held her brother's jacket, her knuckles white. "He wouldn't leave his cameras. Never." I found his film roll in the camera and pocketed it. "We'll develop this, see if it gives us any clues." That night, we set up our own camp nearby. I couldn't sleep. Something about the woods felt different, watchful almost. Around midnight I heard Emma stir in her tent. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I listened. Footsteps, heavy ones moving around our campsite in a circle. Too rhythmic to be a deer or a bear, too heavy to be a person. "Hello?" I called out, my hand on my gun. The footsteps stopped. Then, from the darkness beyond, our flashlight beams, came a sound that made my skin crawl. A low, hollow call that started like an owl, but twisted into something almost like a human voice trying to say words. By morning, the strange noises were gone, but I noticed Paul looking nervous. He'd heard it too, even though he wouldn't admit it. When we got back to the ranger station, I developed James Russell's film. Most of the pictures were what you'd expect. Birds, trees, sunsets over the lakes. But the last frame showed something that made my heart skip. A tall, blurry figure at the edge of the clearing. It stood upright, at least 8 feet tall, but the details were lost in the shadows and blur. "What the hell is that?" Paul asked, looking over my shoulder. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm going to find out." That afternoon, I met Robert White Eagle, an Ojibwe elder who used to work as a ranger back in the 60s. His weathered face told stories before his mouth did, and when I showed him the photo, his eyes grew serious. "The tall ones," he said simply. "They've been in these woods longer than any of us." "You mean Bigfoot?" I asked, trying not to sound skeptical. He shook his head. "The white man's name misses the point. They are guardians, watchers, and if they're showing themselves now, something is wrong in the forest." I didn't know if I believed in such things, but as more campers came in reporting strange footsteps around their tents and eerie calls in the night, I knew something was out there, and it might be our only link to finding James Russell. The next day, a man in an expensive outdoor jacket showed up at the station. Dr. Marcus Fielding, he called himself, a cryptozoologist looking for evidence of unknown species. "I've been tracking reports in this region for years," he told me excitedly, "but never anything this promising. Footprints, hair samples, visual confirmation. This could be it." I didn't trust his hungry eyes or the way he talked about capturing evidence instead of finding a missing person. But he had equipment and knowledge we could use, so I reluctantly agreed to let him join our next search. Little did I know that our search for one missing man was about to turn into something much bigger and much more dangerous than any of us could have imagined. The morning dew still hung on the pine needles as I knelt beside the strangest footprint I'd ever seen. It was huge, about 22 inches long, and pressed deep into the soft dirt near a stream. What caught my eye wasn't just the size, but the tiny lines and ridges in the print, like a human fingerprint but on a foot. "That can't be real," Paul said, staring over my shoulder. "Someone's playing a prank." I carefully poured plaster into the print to make a copy. "If it's a prank, it's an amazing one. These little ridges, you can't fake those, not this perfectly." Next to the footprint, caught on a low bush, I found a tuft of reddish-brown hair. It wasn't from any animal I knew in these woods. I put it in a small plastic bag and tucked it away in my pocket. Emma stayed close to me during the search. She had dark circles under her eyes from not sleeping. "I keep having these dreams about James," she told me quietly while Paul was busy with the plaster cast. "He's in a dark place, but he's alive. I can feel it." I wanted to tell her it was just hope playing tricks on her mind, but something stopped me. The strange footprint, the weird sounds at night, the blurry figure in her brother's photo. Maybe her dreams weren't just dreams. Back at the ranger station, I got news that made my stomach drop. 4 college students who'd been camping about 5 miles from where James disappeared were now missing too. Their campsite was just like his, everything left behind, no signs of trouble. But they'd left something James hadn't, a small tape recorder. I pressed play and felt goosebumps rise on my arms. At first there was just normal camping sounds, laughter, the crackle of their fire, then silence, then footsteps walking around their tent, heavy footsteps, and then voices, not the students, but something trying to sound like a person. The words were garbled, the pitch jumping from very deep to weirdly high, like nothing I'd ever heard a human or animal make. "Please shut that off," Emma whispered, her face pale. Dr. Fielding, on the other hand, was practically jumping with excitement. "This is incredible. Vocal mimicry is extremely rare. We need to get back out there with better recording equipment." "5 people are missing," I snapped at him. "This isn't your big research break." That night, I spread out all my maps of the boundary waters on the table. I marked where James disappeared, where the students vanished, and every spot campers had reported strange noises or footprints. They all fell in a rough circle around an area marked on my oldest map as restricted, a section that didn't even appear on the newer maps. "Robert," I asked White Eagle the next day, "what's in this area? Why was it marked restricted back in the 50s? He studied the map, his finger tracing the outline of the unmarked area. "Sacred land. There was a government agreement with the tribe to leave it alone." He looked up at me with serious eyes. "The agreement was broken many times. Now it seems the Guardians are angry. I decided to check it out myself. Paul told me it was a bad idea to go alone, but I didn't listen. I'd always been stubborn that way." The forest was unusually quiet as I hiked deeper into the unmarked area. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Just the soft crunch of my boots on pine needles and the sound of my own breathing. Then I felt it, the feeling of being watched. The tiny hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I kept walking, my hand resting on my gun, trying to look casual. While scanning the trees around me, the feeling grew stronger as the afternoon wore on. Then the air changed, grew suddenly cold, like walking into a freezer. My breath came out in a white cloud, even though it was June. That's when I saw it. Through the trees ahead, a dark shape moved. It was huge, standing upright on 2 legs, but much taller and broader than any person. It moved with a strange grace, weaving between tree trunks without making a sound. I only saw it for maybe 3 seconds before it disappeared, but in those seconds, I knew I wasn't looking at a bear or any animal I'd ever seen before. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stood frozen, afraid to move forward, afraid to turn my back to run. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small in the silent forest. "We're looking for missing people. We mean no harm." No answer came, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. I took a few pictures of the area where I'd seen the figure, then turned back. The whole way to the ranger station, I felt like something was following me, just out of sight. When I got back, White Eagle was waiting for me. One look at my face told him everything. "You saw one of them," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, my hands still shaking slightly as I poured myself a cup of coffee. "They're forest guardians," he told me, his voice low and serious. "From the old stories. They protect sacred places from those who would harm them. They've lived alongside us for centuries, mostly keeping to themselves. But they become dangerous when their territory is violated, especially when humans bring technology into sacred spaces." "Technology? Like cameras? Like James Russell's camera?" White Eagle nodded slowly. "The old ones believe machines disturb the spirits, capture pieces of the soul." I thought about the missing students and their tape recorder, about the strange voice trying to mimic human speech. "White Eagle," I said slowly. "I think they've taken those people, and I think I know where to look for them." The next morning, I showed Paul my map with all the markings. "I know how this sounds," I said carefully, "but I think there's a group of unknown creatures living in these woods. White Eagle's tribe calls them guardians, or the tall ones, and I think they've taken our missing people." Paul pinched the bridge of his nose. "Meg, I respect you, but this is crazy talk. We're looking for missing hikers, not fairy tale monsters." "Then how do you explain the footprints, the sounds, what I saw in the woods?" I pushed the map toward him. "All I'm asking is that we search this area. If I'm wrong, we've just wasted a day." He finally agreed, but insisted on bringing more rangers. Dr. Fielding heard about our plan and invited himself along. I didn't want him there with all his equipment, but Paul said we could use the extra hands. As we prepared to leave, Emma handed me her brother's compass. He'd want you to have this. It always points true north, no matter what. Our search party headed out at dawn. Me, Paul, 2 other rangers, Dr. Fielding with his bags of equipment, and White Eagle, who insisted on coming despite his age. The sky had a strange green tint to it, like before a storm, but there were no clouds. The lights have been strong recently, White Eagle said, looking up. The Boundary Waters had been having unusual northern lights for months now, brighter and more frequent than anyone could remember. We hiked all morning, getting deeper into the unmarked area than I'd gone before. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with each mile. Around noon, we found more footprints, this time a set of smaller ones alongside the large ones. There's more than one, I said quietly. Dr. Fielding couldn't contain his excitement. He set up sound equipment and motion sensor cameras despite my warnings. This could be the discovery of the century, he kept saying. Proof of an unknown hominid species living right here in Minnesota. As the day went on, the temperature started dropping, even though the sun was still high. Our breath came out in clouds. The birds went silent. That same feeling I'd had before settled over me, like unseen eyes were tracking our every move. "Everyone stay close," I called out. "Don't wander off alone." But of course, Dr. Fielding didn't listen. While we set up camp for the night, he went off to place more of his cameras, ignoring Paul's orders to stay with the group. Night fell, and Fielding hadn't returned. I tried the radio, but got only static. We organized a quick search around the camp, calling his name and shining our flashlights into the darkening woods. White Eagle suddenly grabbed my arm, pointing to a tree about 50 yards from camp. My flashlight beam caught something hanging there, swinging slightly in the breeze. It was Dr. Fielding, hanging upside down from a branch, tied there with vines. We ran to him, my heart in my throat. He was alive but unconscious. A large bump on his head. All his equipment was gone, not just missing, but smashed to pieces, scattered around the base of the tree and carved into the trunk. Crude but clear letters spelled out, "No machines." "Cut him down," I told the others, trying to keep my voice steady. Carefully, as they worked, I scanned the woods with my flashlight. The beam caught a pair of eyes reflecting back at me from between 2 distant trees, large eyes, too high, off the ground to be any normal animal. They blinked once, then vanished. We got Fielding back to camp. When he came to, he was babbling about feeling a presence in his mind, a pressing, heavy feeling that made him confused and disoriented. "They kept walking in circles," he said, shivering under a blanket. "I knew which way camp was, but I couldn't make myself walk that direction, like something was pushing against my thoughts." The other rangers looked scared now. Paul had stopped saying this was all nonsense. "Those new monitoring devices the park installed last month," I said slowly, thinking out loud. "The ones that use ultrasonic frequencies to track wildlife movement patterns. When did they first turn them?" "About 6 weeks ago," Paul answered. "Why?" "And when did campers first start reporting strange noises and footsteps?" His face changed as he made the connection. "About 6 weeks ago. These creatures, whatever they are, they're not normally aggressive," I said. "Something's making them act this way. Something new in their environment." White Eagle nodded. "The old stories say they can feel things we cannot. Vibrations, energies." That night none of us slept. The footsteps circled our camp constantly, sometimes coming right up to the edge of our firelight before retreating. The strange, mimicking calls came from different directions, like they were trying to make us think there were more of them than there actually were. At dawn, we packed up quickly. Fielding was still shaky but could walk with help. We should have headed back to the ranger station. The smart thing would have been to call in more help, maybe even the state police. But I knew which way to go now. The creatures were trying to scare us away from something specific. And that something might lead us to James Russell and those missing students. There, I said, pointing to a rocky ridge about 2 miles north. That's where we need to look. Paul shook his head. This is crazy, Meg. We need to get Fielding to a doctor. You can go back, I told him. Take Fielding with you. But I'm going to that ridge. In the end, Paul and one ranger took Fielding back, while White Eagle and the other ranger, Davis, came with me. As we hiked toward the ridge, the strange calls grew more frequent and more agitated. Twice we saw dark shapes moving through the trees, keeping pace with us. They're herding us, White Eagle said softly, like wolves with prey. The ridge turned out to be the entrance to something I never expected to find in the Boundary Waters. A system of caves hidden behind a stand of thick pines. The entrance was small, something you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Davis shone his flashlight inside. There are markings here, he called out. Like paintings. We squeezed through the narrow opening into a larger chamber beyond. Our flashlight beams revealed crude but unmistakable paintings on the walls, tall, thin figures alongside smaller human shapes. Some scenes showed the tall figures hiding in trees, watching. Others showed them standing beneath lights coming from the sky. These aren't all old, White Eagle said, examining them. Some were made recently. As we moved deeper into the cave system, we found more signs of habitation, areas that looked like sleeping spots with dried moss and leaves, stone tools, piles of bones from animals they'd eaten, and strangest of all, carefully arranged collections of broken human objects, watches, compasses, pieces of cameras, all neatly sorted and placed in small hollows in the rock walls. They're studying us, I whispered, learning about our technology by taking it apart. That's when Davis's flashlight caught something that made us all freeze, a blue backpack half hidden behind a rock. It was James Russell's. James? I called. Out, my voice echoing through the cave. James Russell. No answer came. Just the drip of water somewhere deep in the darkness. I picked up the backpack. Inside was James's journal, filled with notes about wildlife and pencil sketches of birds and plants. The last entry was from the day he disappeared. Strange lights in clearing tonight, setting up camera, something big moving at forest edge. We pushed deeper into the caves, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air grew colder, damper. The sounds of the forest faded behind us. Look at this, Davis said, pointing his light at the ground. A clear trail had been worn into the stone floor, like many feet had walked this same path over many years. We followed the trail until it split into 3 tunnels. I was about to suggest we try the middle one when White Eagle held up his hand. Listen, he whispered. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, human voices. Coming from the left tunnel. We hurried down it, the passage narrow and winding. It opened suddenly into a large chamber with a high ceiling. Our flashlight beams couldn't reach all the way to the top, and there, huddled in a corner, were the 4 missing college students. They looked scared but unhurt, and sitting with them, a camera in his lap, was James Russell. Meg, he said, squinting in the light. Is that really you? The students scrambled to their feet when they saw us, talking all at once about tall creatures that moved too fast to see clearly, about being led through the forest in circles until they were too tired to run, about waking up in these caves, with no way out. They haven't hurt us, James said, his voice oddly calm. They've brought us food, water. They're not what you think. We need to get everyone out of here, I said, already planning the fastest route back to the cave entrance. But James shook his head. They won't let us leave yet. Not until you understand why they've been watching us. Who won't let you leave? The Sasquatch. He smiled a little. That's one name for them. They have their own name, but I can't pronounce it. They communicate mostly through... He tapped his temple. Feelings. Images. It's hard to explain. Mind reading? Davis asked. His voice shaky. More like sharing emotions, James said. They can make you feel what they feel. Show you pictures in your mind. White Eagle nodded, like this made perfect sense to him. But why take you, I asked. Why keep you here? Because of what I saw, James said. He opened his camera and took out the memory card, holding it up. And what I photographed. They're protecting something important. A cold breeze suddenly swept through the chamber, making our flashlights flicker. The students huddled closer together, their eyes wide with fear. They're coming, James whispered. The temperature dropped quickly. My breath fogged in front of my face. From one of the tunnels leading deeper into the cave system came heavy footsteps, several sets of them. Don't run, White Eagle said firmly. Don't show fear. They respect courage. I forced myself to stand still as the footsteps grew louder. Then they appeared at the edge of our flashlight beams. 3 huge figures, at least 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and long arms. Their bodies were covered in reddish-brown hair, thicker in some places than others. Their faces were almost human-like, with deep-set eyes that reflected our lights. I should have been terrified, but instead a strange calm washed over me. Not. My own feeling, something being pushed into my mind from outside. We mean no harm, you must understand. The words weren't spoken aloud. They appeared in my head, alongside images of these creatures watching humans for generations, staying hidden, protecting something precious. What are they protecting? I asked aloud. In answer, one of the creatures stepped forward and held out a hand to me. Not grabbing, not threatening, offering. They want to show you, James said quietly, like they showed me. I hesitated, then took a step forward. The creature's palm was huge, the fingers long and surprisingly gentle as they closed around my hand. It turned and led me toward one of the tunnels, the others falling in behind us. White Eagle and Davis followed, but at a respectful distance. The college students stayed behind with James, too frightened to come deeper into the caves. The tunnels sloped downward, twisting and turning. We walked for what felt like 10 minutes, going deeper underground. Finally, it opened into another chamber, this one smaller but with a high, domed ceiling. In the center of the chamber stood a crystal structure about the size of a small car. It glowed with a soft, pulsing blue light that lit the entire room. The crystal wasn't natural. It had been shaped with smooth facets and precise angles. It was obviously made by intelligence, but not human intelligence. From the skylights came the thought in my head, along with an image of this crystal falling from the aurora borealis centuries ago. It's some kind of monitoring station, I whispered, understanding flowing into me. They were put here to watch it, to protect it. Watch. Protect. Until the others return. The creature released my hand and stepped back, watching me with those deep, intelligent eyes. Who are the others? I asked. But before I could get an answer, White Eagle grabbed my arm. We have trouble, he said, pointing back the way we came. Through the tunnel, faintly, came the sound of new voices. Human voices, and lots of them. The creatures heard it too. They grew agitated, making low hooting sounds to each other, their massive bodies tensing. The park rangers? I asked. White Eagle shook his head grimly. Military boots, heavy equipment, government men. The creatures were already moving, herding us back toward the main chamber. Their thoughts pushed urgently into my mind. Danger, machines, bad ones come. How did they find us? Davis asked as we hurried along the tunnel. I had a sick feeling. In my stomach, fielding his satellite phone, they must have been tracking it. When we reached the main chamber, we found James and the students pressed against the wall. From the entrance tunnel came the sounds of many people approaching, boots on stone, the metallic clicks of weapons, voices calling out commands. U.S. Government! Anyone in these caves, make yourselves known immediately. The creatures moved to stand between us and the approaching voices, their massive bodies forming a wall of protection. We need to talk to them, I said quickly. Explain what's happening. They won't listen, White Eagle said darkly. They never do. I turned to the largest creature, trying to push my own thoughts outward the way they had done to me. We need to find a peaceful way, no fighting. Its eyes met mine, intelligent and sad. Then it pressed something into my hand, a small device that looked like a remote control with a single button. Stop machines. Help us. I looked down at the device, understanding flowing into me. It would disable electronic equipment, like an EMP burst but targeted. The ultrasonic park monitors that had been disturbing them for weeks could be shut down. I'll help you, I promised. But we need to talk to these people first. Make them understand you're not dangerous. The creatures exchanged looks with each other, then the largest one nodded slowly. As the government team entered the chamber, men in dark uniforms with serious faces and serious guns, I stepped forward, hands raised. My name is Margaret O'Donnell, Park Ranger. We found the missing people. They're safe. There's no need for weapons here. But the men didn't lower their guns. Behind them came others in white hazmat suits, carrying scientific equipment and metal cases. Ranger O'Donnell, step aside, said their leader, a stern-faced man with cold eyes. This is now a matter of national security. These creatures aren't dangerous, I insisted. They're intelligent beings protecting something that doesn't belong to us. We are aware of what they're protecting, he replied, his voice flat. That's why we're here. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. They already knew about the crystal. Somehow they'd known all along. How long have you known about them? I asked, not moving from my spot between the government team and the creatures. That's classified, the leader said. Now step aside, Ranger. Behind me I could feel the creatures growing more agitated. The temperature in the cave dropped even further. I can't do that, I said. These beings aren't threatening us. They've kept themselves hidden for centuries. They only became active when your new ultrasonic equipment started hurting them. The leader's eyes narrowed. And how exactly do you know what hurts them, Ranger O'Donnell? They showed me. They can communicate through thoughts and feelings. One of the scientists stepped forward eagerly. Telepathic capabilities? Fascinating. We'll need to run tests. No tests, I cut him off. No experiments. These are intelligent beings with rights. The leader sighed, like I was a child being difficult. This isn't a debate, Ranger. We have authorization to secure this site and any entities within it. White Eagle moved to stand beside me. You have no right to this sacred place. This land was protected by treaty. Treaties change, the leader said coldly. National security concerns override prior agreements. I felt something new from the creatures behind me. Not just fear or anger, but a deep sadness and resignation, like they'd seen this before. Images flowed into my mind. Humans with guns coming for them before, many times throughout history, forcing them deeper into hiding. Above us, something strange happened. The ceiling of the cave seemed to shimmer, the rock becoming almost transparent. Through it, I could see the night sky and the most intense aurora borealis I'd ever witnessed. Waves of green and blue and purple dancing across the stars. It's happening again, one of the scientists said, staring upward. The signal is activating. What signal? I demanded, but I already knew. The crystal deeper in the caves was responding to the aurora. One of the creatures let out a low, mournful call. The others answered. Then they began pushing past me, moving toward the government team. Not attacking, but trying to reach the tunnel that led to the crystal chamber. They're moving, the leader shouted. Take them down. No! I screamed, but it was too late. One of the soldiers fired. The shot echoed deafeningly in the cave. I expected to see one of the creatures fall, but instead, the largest one had moved with impossible speed, placing itself between the gun and me. It staggered, dark blood matting its reddish fur. But still it stood, shielding me with its massive body. And in that moment, as our eyes met, its mind fully opened to mine. I saw everything. They were guardians, placed here thousands of years ago by visitors from another world. The crystal was a monitoring station, recording Earth's development. The creatures themselves had been modified, enhanced to survive and protect the station until the visitors returned. The aurora was their means of communication, sending data back to wherever the visitors had come from. The creature's massive hand touched my head gently. More images flowed. The visitors would return soon. The increased aurora activity was a sign. But if humans destroyed the crystal or captured the guardians, the visitors might see Earth as hostile, dangerous. "Stop!" I shouted at the soldiers. "You don't understand what you're doing. These creatures are guardians for something bigger than all of us." For a moment, everyone froze. The wounded creature swayed but remained standing in front of me. White. Eagle began chanting softly, an Ojibwe prayer I didn't understand. Then the leader gave a hand signal and more soldiers poured into the chamber. "Secure the objective," he ordered. "Contain the specimens." What happened next was chaos. The creatures moved with blinding speed, not attacking but trying to prevent the soldiers from reaching the tunnel to the crystal chamber. More shots were fired. James and the students pressed themselves against the wall, trying to stay out of the way. White Eagle pulled something from his pocket, a small leather pouch. He threw it to the ground where it burst in a cloud of herbs and powder. A sharp, pungent smell filled the air, making the soldiers cough and their eyes water. "This way," he called to me, gesturing toward one of the other tunnels. "We must reach the sacred stone first." I hesitated, looking at the injured creature still standing protectively near me. "Go," came its thought. "Help us." I ran after White Eagle, the small device the creature had given me clutched in my hand. Behind us, the sounds of struggle continued, the soldiers shouting, the creature's low calls, more shots. White Eagle knew another way to the crystal chamber. We raced through narrow tunnels, squeezing through tight spots where the larger soldiers couldn't follow easily. When we burst into the crystal chamber, it was transformed. The crystal now pulsed with brilliant blue-white light in time, with the aurora visible through the now transparent ceiling. The air hummed with energy. "We're too late," White Eagle said, as booted feet pounded in the tunnel behind us. "They're coming." I looked down at the device in my hand. Maybe not. The soldiers filed into the chamber, weapons raised, led by their cold-eyed leader. Behind them came scientists with equipment. Their eyes widened at the sight of the glowing crystal. "Step away from the artifact," the leader ordered us. "You don't know what you're doing," I pleaded. "This isn't just some object you can take. It's part of something bigger, a connection to others who might be watching us, judging us by how we treat their guardians." "Others?" The leader's expression changed slightly. "You mean extraterrestrials?" "Yes," I said. "And they're coming back. Soon. That's what the aurora means. That's why the creatures are so agitated." One of the scientists approached the crystal cautiously. "The energy readings are off the charts. If we could harness this—" "Don't touch it," White Eagle warned. But the scientist reached out anyway. The moment his gloved hand touched the crystal, a pulse of energy knocked everyone off their feet. The ceiling became fully transparent, showing the aurora now covering the entire sky in rippling curtains of light. The leader got to his feet first. "Secure that thing, now!" "No!" I shouted, and pressed the button on the device the creature had given me. Nothing seemed to happen at first. Then all the soldiers' radios squealed with feedback. Their tactical lights flickered and died. The scientists' equipment shut down with electrical pops. In that moment of confusion, the largest creature appeared in the tunnel entrance, still bleeding but standing tall. Behind it came the others, and behind them James and the students. The creature's eyes met mine across the chamber, and a wave of gratitude flowed into my mind. Then it turned to the crystal and made a series of complicated gestures with its long fingers. The crystal pulsed once, twice. and a piece of it, about the size of my fist, detached from the main structure. It floated through the air to the creature, who caught it gently. The soldiers raised their weapons again. The last person who fired a gun in here was knocked unconscious. By energy feedback, I warned them. I wouldn't try it. The leader held up his hand, signaling his men to hold their fire. His cold eyes calculated, reassessed. What are they doing? He asked me, his voice tense but controlled. Saving a piece, I said, understanding flowing from the creature's mind to mine. A backup, in case you destroy the main crystal. The creature lumbered toward White Eagle and placed the crystal fragment in his weathered hands. White Eagle nodded respectfully, then turned and smashed it against the stone floor. The leader shouted in alarm, but instead of shattering, the crystal broke into 2 perfect pieces. White Eagle kept one and handed the other to me. It was warm in my palm, still glowing faintly. Why? The leader demanded. Insurance, White Eagle said simply. Now there are 3 pieces, not just one. If you want to understand this power, you'll need all of us. The guardians, the people of this land, and those who would study it. Balance. The leader stared at us for a long moment, then at the crystal, then at the creatures. We're taking the main crystal, he said finally, and one of these beings for study. No, I said firmly. The crystal, maybe, but not them. They've protected it for centuries. They deserve their freedom. This isn't a negotiation, Ranger. Maybe it should be, James said, stepping forward. He'd been quiet until now. I have over 1,000 photos and videos of these creatures and that crystal. Copies are already in secure places. If anything happens to them or to us, those files go public. I looked at him in surprise. The shy wildlife photographer had found his courage. The leader's jaw tightened. He spoke quietly to one of his men, then turned back to us. The main crystal comes with us. The beings remain free but monitored, and all of you sign non-disclosure agreements. That's the deal. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than I'd hoped. 4. I looked to the largest creature, trying to send my question. Is this acceptable? It blinked slowly, then nodded its massive head. For now, until the others return. The military removed the main crystal over the next few days, taking it away in a special container. The creatures retreated deeper into the cave system, watching from a distance. James and the students were debriefed, then released after signing stacks of papers, swearing them to secrecy. The official story became simple wilderness disorientation. James had gotten lost and hit his head. The students had panicked and wandered, in circles. No mention of tall creatures or glowing crystals, but something had changed in me. The crystal fragment White Eagle had given me sometimes glowed in sync with the aurora, which continued to be unusually active. And sometimes, when I was alone in the forest, I could sense the creatures watching me from the shadows, not with hostility, but with a kind of kinship. A bond had formed, a connection I couldn't explain, but could definitely feel. They were still out there, waiting, watching, and somehow I knew I was now part of their vigil, helping to protect them until whatever or whoever put them here finally returned. The boundary waters held their secret, and now it was my secret too. My name is Jack Hollister. I've been a ranger at Olympic National Park for almost 15 years now. People around here know me as the guy who finds lost hikers. I guess I've earned that reputation. There's something about tracking that just makes sense to me, like reading a story written in footprints, broken twigs, and disturbed earth. The burn scars across my back are from my days as a smoke jumper. I don't talk about them much. Just like I don't talk much about losing Sarah, my wife, last year. Cancer took her quick, too quick. Now it's just me and Rebecca, our 16-year-old daughter. She's got her mother's eyes and a sense of direction that's almost spooky. Even as a little kid, she never got lost in these woods. It was early October when things started getting strange. the kind of fall day where the air feels sharp in your lungs. I was sent to check on a weather station up in the northern part of the park. Nobody had heard from Miller, the researcher up there, for almost a week. Not too unusual. Reception is spotty, and Miller liked his solitude. But protocol is protocol. The station sat on a ridge overlooking a valley of old-growth forest. Even before I got there, something felt off. No smoke from the chimney. No Miller coming out to greet me with his usual complaints about headquarters, bothering him. The door wasn't locked. Inside, everything was neat, too neat. No dirty dishes, no rumpled blankets on the bed, just Miller's journal sitting open on his desk. The last entry was from 6 days ago. I picked it up and read, "The fog. Came back today. Moving against the wind again. There are shapes in it that shouldn't exist. I'm going to try to photograph them tomorrow." There were no photographs, no camera, no Miller. I radioed back to headquarters and spoke with Chief Ranger Walter Simmons. Walt's been running things for as long as I can remember. A big man with a permanent squint and a voice like gravel. "No sign of him?" Walt asked. "None. His Jeep is still here. Looks like he just walked out and never came back. Any tracks?" "Nothing clear. It rained 2 days ago." Walt was quiet for a moment. "Secure the station and come back. We'll send a search. Team tomorrow." That night at home, Rebecca could tell something was bothering me. She has a way of knowing things like her mother did. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked as we ate dinner. "Just a missing researcher," I said. "Nothing for you to worry about. The one from the North Ridge station." When I looked surprised, she added, "Martin mentioned it when he drove me home from school today. Martin Oakes, new ranger, transferred from Arizona 3 months ago. Friendly kid, but still getting used to our weather. He's been driving Rebecca home sometimes when I'm working late. I make a mental note to talk to him about discussing park business with my daughter." "Well, we'll find him," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The next morning, I met the search team at headquarters. Martin was there, looking like he hadn't slept much. Also present was Dr. Helen Morgan, a scientist who studies unusual animals. Cryptozoologist, she calls herself. She'd been in the park for a few weeks now, looking into reports of strange wildlife sightings. "Mind if I tag along?" she asked. "My research might be relevant." Walt nodded. "Jack, you're taking point. Martin, you go with him. Dr. Morgan can observe but stays with the main team." We spread out and searched the area around the weather station. About a half-mile north, Martin called out to me, "Ranger Hollister, you need to see this." I made my way to him. He was standing at the edge of a perfect circle of fog, about 30 feet across. It sat motionless despite the breeze rustling the trees around us. "What do you make of this?" Martin asked. "I've never seen fog just sit like that." I hadn't either, and something else bothered me. The forest was silent, no birds, no insects, nothing. "Let's go around it," I said. As we circled the fog, I noticed animal tracks, deer, rabbits, even a bear's prints, all veering away from the circle like they were avoiding it. Dr. Morgan caught up to us and immediately started taking notes. "Fascinating," she said. "I've heard reports of these fog patches, but never seen one myself." "Reports from who?" I asked. "Hikers, park workers, a few locals. Most people dismiss them as normal weather patterns, but animals know better." "What do you mean?" She gestured at the tracks. "Notice how nothing goes near it. Animals sense things we don't." By evening, we'd found no sign of Miller. Just 3 more of those strange fog circles. Walt called off the search as darkness fell. "We'll try again tomorrow," he said, but I could see something in his eyes, something that looked a lot like fear. I drove home thinking about Miller's journal. Fog that moves against the wind, shapes that shouldn't exist, and now these perfect circles that animals won't go near. When I got home, Rebecca was sitting at the kitchen table with a worried look. "Dad, do you remember Mrs. Hanson telling us about her brother who disappeared in the park back when I was in 4th grade? I nodded. "Sure, about 12 years ago. And that family that vanished when I was 4, that would have been 24 years ago. I sat down across from her. What are you getting at? I looked it up online. There have been clusters of disappearances in the park. Every 12 years. Like clockwork. Dad, this is that year. That night I couldn't sleep. Rebecca's words kept echoing in my head. Disappearances every 12 years. I got up around 3 a.m. and went to my small home office. I pulled out old park records I'd brought. Home over the years. Missing persons reports, search and rescue logs, incident files. I spread them across my desk and started making notes. Names, dates, locations. By sunrise, I had covered my wall with a map of the park and colored pins marking where people had vanished. Rebecca found me there, bleary-eyed, when she woke up for school. Dad, did you sleep at all? I shook my head. You were right. There's a pattern. She walked closer to look at my map. Every 12 years, just like I said. Not just that, I said, pointing to the clusters of pins. They all happened during the new moon. And look at the locations. The pins formed rough circles around certain parts of the park, areas where the old-growth forest was thickest, areas where rangers sometimes talked about strange fogs. I have to show this to Walt, I said. After dropping Rebecca at school, I went straight to headquarters with my findings. Walt listened without saying a word, his face getting grimmer by the minute. I know about the pattern, Jack, he finally said. You know? Why haven't we done anything about it? He sighed heavily. What would you have me do? Tell visitors that our park eats people every 12 years? Issue warnings about magic fog? We could close those areas during the cycle, I argued. Based on what evidence? I've tried before. The higher-ups want proof, not patterns on a map. I was about to argue more when Martin burst into the office out of breath. The Keller family, he gasped. They're gone. The Kellers were staying in one of our rental cabins. Parents and 2 kids, ages 7 and 9. They hadn't checked out that morning, and when housekeeping went to clean, they found the cabin empty. But their car was still parked outside. Their suitcases were still unpacked. Half-eaten breakfast sat on the table. Coffee cups were still warm. The cabin was locked from the inside. We organized a search immediately. While others combed the woods, I examined the cabin more carefully. Nothing seemed disturbed. No signs of struggle. Just a family that vanished. In the middle of breakfast. That's when I found it. Under the younger child's pillow was a crayon drawing. It showed their cabin with tall, thin figures standing in a grey cloud outside the window. The figures had no faces. I folded the drawing and put it in my pocket before anyone else could see it. That night, I showed Rebecca the drawing while we sat at our kitchen table. What do you make of this? I asked. She studied it with serious eyes. They saw something outside their window, something scary, scary enough to make them leave in the middle of breakfast. Without their car or bags? Rebecca didn't answer right away. Did I ever tell you about the fog I saw when I was little, right after Mom got sick the first time? My chest tightened. No. What fog? It came up to my window at night. I thought, it was just a cloud, but it moved funny, like it was looking for a way in. She paused. There was something in it, Dad. Something watching me. I fought to keep my voice steady. Why didn't you tell me this before? Mom made me promise not to. She said it would worry you too much. The next morning, Martin and I went to search an area where hikers had reported seeing unusual fog the day before. The sky was clear, but as we rounded a bend in the trail, we saw it. A bank of thick gray mist hovering in a ravine. It wasn't moving, despite the breeze. Is that one of those circles you found? Martin asked. Bigger, I said. But yeah, same thing. We approached cautiously. The silence was complete. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves, just our footsteps. And breathing, that's when we saw the deer. A young doe approached the edge of the fog from the other side. She seemed nervous, stopping to sniff the air every few steps. Don't move, I whispered to Martin. The doe took one more step, and her front legs disappeared into the mist. She jerked back as if startled, but then moved forward again, more deliberately. This time, she walked fully into the fog. For a moment, we could see her silhouette in the mist, and then nothing. The fog seemed to pulse once, like a heartbeat. When it settled again, the deer was gone. No sounds, no movement, just gone. Did you see that? Martin's voice cracked. I nodded, my mouth dry. Let's get back to headquarters. On our way back, we ran into Dr. Morgan. She was taking samples from a tree near one of the fog circles. Find anything interesting? I asked. The trees near these fog formations show unusual growth patterns, she said. Almost like they're growing in two different time streams. What does that mean? Martin asked. I'm not sure yet, but I think these fog patches are more than weather phenomena. They might be doorways of some kind. I thought about the deer vanishing before our eyes. Doorways to where? She shook her head. That's what I'm trying to figure out. When I picked up Rebecca from school that afternoon, she was excited about something. Dad, I need to show you something at the library. The local library had a small section on Native American history. Rebecca led me straight to a book about Quileute legends. Look at this, she said, pointing to a page with old tribal markings. These are warnings about those who walk between worlds. The Quileute believed there were thin places in the forest where other realities leaked through. The markings showed tall, thin figures standing in what looked like clouds. Just like the Keller child's drawing, the boundaries should not be crossed, Rebecca read. They watch, they take, they learn. A chill ran down my spine. How did you find this? I've been researching local myths since you told me about the missing researcher. The timing matches, Dad. The Quileute said these beings could only cross over during certain celestial alignments when the moon is dark. On our way home, I noticed fog forming in the valleys below us. Normal fog at first, but as darkness fell, I saw it. Patches that didn't move with the wind, patches that formed perfect circles. The new moon was coming in 3 days, and according to the pattern, that's when the disappearances would peak. The next morning I called in all my unused vacation days. Walt didn't argue. He knew what I was doing. Be careful, Jack, was all he said. I spent the day gathering everything I could find about the fog and the disappearances. Dr. Morgan agreed to meet me at my house that evening. While waiting for her, I tried calling Martin, but he didn't answer. According to headquarters, he'd gone to check on some hikers near one of the areas where we'd spotted fog circles. He should have checked in hours ago. Dr. Morgan arrived just after dinner, carrying a laptop and several notebooks. I've been analyzing the patterns, she said as Rebecca cleared the table to make room for her materials. The fog appearances aren't random. They follow specific geometric patterns across the park. She opened her laptop and showed us a map similar to the one I'd made, but with additional markings. See these rock formations? She pointed to several spots on the map. They're all naturally occurring, but they create almost perfect alignments. When viewed from above, alignments with what? Rebecca asked. Stars, Dr. Morgan said. Specific stars that only align with these formations during certain times of the year. Every 12 years, I finished. She nodded. The current alignment started about 2 weeks ago and will peak during the new moon. In 3 days, Rebecca added. Dr. Morgan pulled out another notebook. I've also been researching similar phenomena reported in other old-growth forests around the world. There are accounts of mist people or fog walkers going back centuries. She showed us sketches from various cultures, all depicting tall, thin humanoid figures with elongated fingers and blank faces. What are they? I asked. I don't think they're from our world, she said simply. Based on the evidence, I believe they exist in a different dimension that occasionally overlaps with ours during these alignments. The fog is the visible manifestation of that overlap. It sounded crazy, but after what I'd seen, the deer vanishing, the perfect circles of fog, the 12-year pattern, I was ready to believe. How do we stop them? I asked. I'm not sure we can, Dr. Morgan admitted, but I've found some accounts suggesting they avoid certain things. Ultraviolet light seems to disrupt the fog. Salt creates boundaries they can't cross. Iron repels them. Just then, my radio crackled. It was Walt. Jack, we found Martin. His voice told me it wasn't good news. Where? I asked. Hospital, you should come. I left Rebecca with Dr. Morgan and drove to the small hospital in town. Walt was waiting in the hallway outside a room. What happened? I asked. Hikers found him sitting on a trail, staring at nothing. He's not injured. But gee, Walt's voice trailed off. But what? See for yourself. Martin lay in the hospital bed, eyes open but unseeing. His hair, which had been dark brown yesterday, was now completely white. When a nurse shined a penlight in his eyes, they reflected the light like an animal's would at night, glowing yellow-green instead of showing the normal red-eye effect. He didn't respond to his name, didn't blink, just stared at the ceiling, occasionally mumbling words that made no sense. Where did they find him? I asked Walt. About half a mile from where you two saw that deer disappear. Doctor says there's nothing physically wrong with him. It's like his mind just checked out. I leaned closer to Martin, trying to make sense of his mumbling. They're studying us, he suddenly said clearly, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. His reflective eyes locked onto mine. They want to know how we think, how we feel. They've been watching for so long. Then he started laughing, a high, unnatural sound that made the nurse rush in. They sedated him, and his grip on my wrist relaxed. 3 days, he whispered as his eyes closed. When the moon is dark, they'll come through fully. I drove home in a daze, Martin's words echoing in my head. When I got there, Rebecca and Dr. Morgan were still at the kitchen table, surrounded by books and papers. "We've found something," Rebecca said excitedly. "Dr. Morgan figured out how the fog beings choose who to take." Dr. Morgan pointed to her notes. "They're drawn to certain brainwave patterns, particularly those produced during states of curiosity, wonder, or fear. Children are especially vulnerable because their minds are naturally more open to possibilities adults would dismiss." "Like seeing shapes in the fog," I said. "Exactly. Once they've been noticed, they can influence human perception, make people see things that would draw them closer. Like loved ones," Rebecca said quietly. I looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Some of the accounts mention people seeing deceased family members in the fog, people they miss." I thought of Sarah, gone just over a year now. Would I walk into the fog if I saw her there? The answer scared me. "We need a plan," I said, pushing the thought away. "The new moon is in 3 days, and based on the pattern, that's when most people will vanish." Dr. Morgan nodded. "I've been working on something." She pulled out a sketch of a device. "If my theory is correct, we can use ultraviolet lights powered by generators to create barriers the fog can't cross. We place them around the areas most likely to experience breakthroughs." "How do we know where those will be?" I asked. "My calculations suggest 5 main locations," she said, marking spots on the map, "based on the star alignments and the geometric patterns of the rock formations." We spent the rest of the night planning. By morning, we had a strategy: set up UV light barriers at the 5 locations, coordinate with park rangers to keep people away from those areas, and monitor for fog formations. While Dr. Morgan went to gather the equipment we'd need, I took Rebecca to school. I didn't want her involved in this, despite her knowledge of what was happening. "Promise me you'll stay at Aunt Linda's for the next few days," I said as I dropped her off. "Dad, promise me, Rebecca, this isn't a game." She nodded reluctantly. "I promise." I spent the day gathering supplies and briefing Walt on our plan. To my surprise, he didn't question the strange preparations. "My brother disappeared in 1952, he finally admitted. During that year's cycle, Everyone thought he'd fallen into a ravine or been taken by a bear. But I knew better. I saw the fog that day, moving against the wind. Why didn't you ever say anything? He gave a bitter laugh. Who would believe me? I was 10 years old. His next words chilled me to the bone. He came back, 5 years later. Walked out of the woods like he'd been gone an hour, but he was an old man by then, said he'd spent a few hours in what he called the grey place. Died a week later. That night, as I loaded equipment into my truck, I tried calling Rebecca to check in. No answer. I called my sister Linda. Rebecca, she said. She's not here. I thought she was staying with you this week. My blood ran cold. I drove home as fast as I could, praying she was there. The house was empty, but on her bed I found a note. Dad, I've been seeing Mum in the fog for weeks. She says she needs my help. I know it's not really her, but I think I can learn more about them. Don't worry, I'll be careful. Love, Rebecca. I stared at Rebecca's note, my hands shaking. She'd been seeing Sarah in the fog for weeks, and she'd gone looking for whatever was pretending to be her mother. I grabbed my radio and called Walt. Rebecca's gone, I said, my voice breaking. She went looking for the fog creatures. Where? Walt asked. I don't know, but she left a note saying she's been seeing what looks like her mother. I'll send search teams to all the known fog locations. We'll find her, Jack. But I knew regular. Search teams wouldn't be enough. Not with what we were dealing with. I called Dr. Morgan next. We need to move up our timeline, I told her. My daughter's gone into the fog. Her sharp intake of breath told me everything. Jack, I'm so sorry. I'll bring everything I have. Meet me at headquarters in 30 minutes. I grabbed Rebecca's note and ran to my truck. As I drove to headquarters, I noticed the fog in the valleys was thicker tonight, and in places it wasn't behaving like normal fog. Some patches moved against the wind. Others stayed perfectly still in circular formations. Dr. Morgan was waiting with several large cases of equipment when I arrived. Walt had already organized 3 search teams. These are the most likely locations, Dr. Morgan said, pointing to spots on the map. Based on previous fog sightings and the alignment calculations, I'll take the northern sector, I said, pointing to the area where we'd found those first perfect circles of fog. It's closest to where Rebecca and I saw fog near our house. Take these. Dr. Morgan handed me a backpack full of gear, UV flashlights, a portable UV light barrier, iron filings, salt, and a tether system. Tether system. If you have to go into the fog, tie this around your waist, she explained, showing me a thin cable attached to a motorized reel. It should help you find your way back. Should? I asked. We're dealing with dimensional physics we don't understand, she said grimly. I can't make any guarantees. I headed north in my truck, watching the fog grow thicker as I drove. By the time I reached the trailhead, visibility was down to about 20 feet. I strapped on the backpack, put my radio on my belt, and started, hiking toward the first location. The forest was eerily silent. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of leaves rustling, despite the slight breeze I could feel on my face. It was as if the woods were holding their breath. After about a mile, I came to a clearing and stopped dead. In the center was the largest fog circle I'd seen yet, at least 50 feet across and perfectly round. It glowed faintly from within, pulsing like a heartbeat. And standing at its edge was Rebecca. Rebecca! I called out, running toward her. She turned slowly, her eyes unfocused. Dad, is that you? Get away from the fog, I said, reaching for her arm. But Mom's in there, she said dreamily. She's been waiting for us. That's not your mother, I said firmly, pulling her back. Whatever. You're seeing, it's not Sarah. Rebecca blinked, seeming to come back to herself a little. I know that, I think, but it looks just like her. Sounds like her. Her voice broke. I miss her so much, Dad. I miss her too, I said, hugging her tight. But she wouldn't want us to follow her. Not like this. Just then, the fog began to move. It stretched toward us, tendrils reaching out like fingers. I pulled Rebecca further back and shone the UV flashlight at the approaching mist. The light cut through it, making it recoil, as if in pain. "We need to go," I said, still holding the light toward the fog. "Now." But as we turned to leave, we saw more fog circles forming around us, cutting off our escape routes. They were smaller than the main circle, but growing quickly. I grabbed the radio. "Walt, we're surrounded." "Northern sector, the large clearing about a mile in from the trailhead." "Static," answered me. "Dr. Morgan, anyone?" More static. I pulled out the portable UV barrier, a set of small lights connected to a battery pack. "Help me set these up," I told Rebecca. We quickly placed the lights in a circle around us, creating a 10-foot safe zone. When we turned them on, the approaching fog stopped at the light barrier, swirling angrily just beyond the UV glow. "What do we do now?" Rebecca asked, her voice small. Before I could answer, a figure appeared in the main fog bank. It was tall, at least 7 feet, and unnaturally thin, with long arms that ended in fingers like twigs. It had no face, just a smooth, blank surface where features should be. But the worst part was that it wore the outline of Sarah's face like a mask. Transparent and shifting but recognizable. "Jack," it said in Sarah's voice, "bring Rebecca to me. I've missed you both so much." Rebecca grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. "That's what I've been seeing," she whispered, "but it never came out of the fog before." More figures appeared beside the first one. Some were faceless, but others wore the shifting faces of people I recognized. Miller the researcher, the missing Keller family, and others who had disappeared over the years. "What do you want?" I called out, fighting to keep my voice steady. "To study," the figure wearing Sarah's face said. "To understand." "Understand what?" "Consciousness, emotion, time." The words came out wrong, like it was trying to speak through water. "Your world touches ours every 12 years. We use these moments to learn. By taking people," I demanded. "They are not harmed. They exist in our dimension. They teach us." "Bring them back," I said. The figure tilted its head, the motion too, fluid to be human. "Some have returned, changed but whole." I thought of Walt's brother, returned as an old man after experiencing just hours in their world. "Time moves differently where you're from," I said. "Yes, what is moments for us is more for you." The UV lights flickered. The battery was starting to drain. "Why, Sarah?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why use my dead wife's face?" "We use what you most wish to see," the creature said. "It draws you to us." The lights flickered again, longer this time. The fog immediately pushed forward before, retreating when the lights came back on. "We need to move," I told Rebecca. "When I say run, head for that gap between the fog banks. I'll be right behind you." She nodded, fear clear in her eyes. I pulled out the iron filings and salt from my pack. According to Dr. Morgan's research, they might create a barrier the creatures couldn't cross. "Ready?" I whispered to Rebecca. "Run!" She sprinted for the gap. I threw the iron filings in an arc behind us and followed. The fog surged after us, but seemed to hesitate at the line of iron. We ran hard, dodging between trees and jumping over logs. Behind us, I could hear something moving, not footsteps, but a slithering, rushing sound, like wind through a tunnel. "There's the trail," Rebecca pointed ahead, but just as we reached it, fog rolled in from both sides, cutting us off again. We skidded to a stop. "This way," I said, pulling her toward a rocky outcrop nearby. We could climb it and maybe get above. The fog. We scrambled up the rocks, the fog swirling around the base. From our higher vantage point, I could see fog circles all through the forest, pulsing with that same heartbeat rhythm. "Dad, look." Rebecca pointed to the sky. Above us, the stars were unusually bright despite the new moon, and certain stars formed lines that seemed to point directly to rock formations in the park, just as Dr. Morgan had described. "The alignment," I said. "It's happening now." Below us, the fog was growing thicker, climbing higher up the rocks. And in it, more of those tall figures were taking shape, all wearing faces like masks. Some I recognized, some I didn't. My radio suddenly crackled to life. "Jack?" It was Dr. Morgan. "Can you hear me?" "We're here," I said quickly. "Rebecca's with me. We're surrounded by fog creatures." "Listen carefully," she said, her voice breaking up. "The main incursion point is forming in your area. I've calculated the exact center. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to close all the dimensional gateways at once." "How do we disrupt it?" I asked. "I'm sending you coordinates. I've developed a device that should create enough UV radiation to collapse the gateway, but someone has to place it at the exact center of the incursion point. Inside the main fog bank," I realized. "Yes, I'm sorry, Jack, it's the only way." I looked at Rebecca, then down at the fog swirling below us. The tall figures were still there, watching, waiting. "Send the coordinates," I said, "and talk me through the device setup." Dr. Morgan sent the coordinates to my phone. The center of the incursion was in the middle of the large fog circle we'd first seen, the one with the entity wearing Sarah's face. "The device is in your pack," Dr. Morgan explained through the static-filled radio. "It looks like a small silver box with a digital timer." I dug through the pack and found it. The box was about the size of a lunchbox, with a keypad on top. "I see it," I said. "When you reach the coordinates, enter this code, 722943, then press the red button. That will start a 3-minute countdown. You need to be out of the fog before the countdown ends." "What happens if I'm not?" the silence told. "Me everything. I understand," I said. "I'm going in." "Dad, no!" Rebecca grabbed my arm. "Let me do it. They've been calling to me for weeks. They might let me get closer." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "You're staying right here." I pulled out the tether system and secured one end to a tree growing. Then from the rocks, the other end I fastened around my waist. "This will help me find my way back," I told Rebecca. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, use the radio to call Walt. Tell him to bring everyone with UV lights to these coordinates." She nodded, tears in her eyes. I took a deep breath and looked at the fog below us. "I need to get down there first." We carefully made our way down the backside of the rocks, away from the watching figures. Once on the ground, I took out the last UV flashlight and handed it to Rebecca. "Stay here. Keep this on. It will protect you if the fog comes closer." I turned to go, but she caught my hand. "Dad, wait." Her voice was different, more certain. "There's something else I need to tell you. When I saw Mom in the fog, she told me things about them." "What things?" I asked. "They can't just take anyone. They need a connection, a strong emotional link. That's why they use faces of people we love and—" She hesitated. "They can't maintain that connection if the person they're trying to take is feeling a powerful emotion they don't understand." "What emotion?" "Hope," she said simply. "They don't have it where they come from. They don't understand it. That's why some people come back and others don't. The ones who come back never lost hope." I hugged her tight. "I'll remember that. Now stay here." With the tether trailing behind me, I walked toward the edge of the fog. I could still see the tall figures standing motionless within it. The one wearing Sarah's face moved forward as I approached. "You're coming to us," it said in Sarah's voice. "I am," I replied, gripping the device in my hand. "But not for the reason you think." I switched on my UV flashlight with my free hand and stepped into the fog. Immediately the world changed. The forest vanished, replaced by a grey landscape that seemed to stretch forever. The tall figures surrounded me, their blank faces now fully visible without the borrowed human features. The air felt thick, like breathing underwater. The tether behind me was still visible, a thin silver line leading back to reality. I checked my phone. The coordinates Dr. Morgan had sent were still 30 yards ahead, into the heart of this grey place. I walked forward, keeping the UV light sweeping from side to side. The figures moved away from the beam, drifting back like shadows at sunrise. "Why do you resist?" The voice came from all around me now, no longer bothering to sound like Sarah. It was many voices speaking as one. We offer knowledge, understanding. You take people against their will, I said, still walking. Keep them here until they die in their own world. Time is different here, the voices said. What feels like forever to you is a moment to us. That doesn't make it right. I checked my phone again. I was getting closer to the coordinates. The grey landscape began to shift around me. I saw glimpses of Olympic National Park from different times, ancient forests with trees bigger than any standing. Today, the same valleys covered in ice, the land as it might look hundreds of years in the future, and then I saw people, all the missing ones, suspended in bubble-like pockets throughout this dimension. They floated motionless, their eyes open but unseeing, like Martin in the hospital. Spotted Miller, the researcher. The Keller family, parents holding their children's hands, even in their suspended state. Dozens more I didn't recognize, 20 yards from the coordinates now. You study them, I said, understanding dawning. Like scientists with lab rats. We study consciousness, the voices replied. The way your kind experiences time, emotions, connections between minds, these are unknown to us. Let them go, I demanded, all of them. We cannot. They are part of us now, their minds connected to our collective. 10 yards. I could see something ahead, a pulsing point of light floating. About waist high, the air around it rippled like heat waves off hot pavement. That's your gateway, I guessed. The connection between our worlds. The figures moved closer, no longer retreating from my UV light. I was deep in their territory now, and the light was growing weaker 5 yards. I reached the pulsing light. It was beautiful in a strange way. Colors I couldn't name swirling within it, energies I couldn't understand flowing through it. I placed the device directly beneath it and entered the code Dr. Morgan had given me. 72943. The figures surged toward me, realizing what I was doing. I pressed the red button. The device beeped and a countdown appeared. 3 Zhao, 2:59, 2:58. I turned to run back along my tether line, but the figures blocked my path. Their forms were changing, becoming more solid, more threatening. You cannot stop the connection, the voices said. We have waited too long for this moment. I swept the UV light at them, but it was much weaker now, barely pushing them back. 30 on the countdown. I tried running in a different direction, but more figures appeared, blocking every escape route. I was surrounded. Then I heard Rebecca's voice, not from outside, but here in this gray place. Dad! I followed the tether. I'm here! I turned and saw her pushing through the fog several yards away, her UV flashlight much brighter than mine. Rebecca! Go back! No, Dad. I can help. The figures turned toward her, drawn by a new presence to study. I used the distraction to run toward her. Vicky on the countdown. We need to get out of here, I said when I reached her. The device is going to collapse this whole place. I know the way, she said with strange confidence. I've been seeing it. In my dreams. She took my hand and led me through the grey landscape, moving with certainty I couldn't understand. The figures followed, but they seemed unable to move as quickly as we could. There are others, I said, thinking of the suspended people I'd seen. We can't leave them. Rebecca stopped suddenly. You're right. She closed her eyes, concentrating hard. Mom showed me how to do this. Mom? Not the thing pretending to be her, the real Mom. Her memories are here, Dad. Part of her is caught in this place. Dwalaz on the countdown. Rebecca raised her hands, and I felt a surge of something pass through the air. All around us, the suspended people began to stir, their bubbles popping like soap in the wind. How are you doing this? I whispered. Hope, she said simply. They don't understand it. It disrupts their control. The people were waking up now, looking around in confusion. I spotted the Kellers and called to them, "Follow us, quickly!" On the countdown, we ran, a stream of bewildered people following. Behind us, the grey landscape was beginning to fracture, cracks appearing in what looked like the very fabric of reality. The tether was growing brighter now, a silver lifeline leading back to our world. "This way!" I shouted to the crowd behind us. "Follow the line!" 30 on the countdown. We reached what seemed to be the boundary between dimensions, a wall of fog thicker than the rest. I could see the forest faintly on the other side. Through. "Here," Rebecca said, still holding my hand tight. We pushed through the boundary, the sensation like walking through cobwebs. Behind us, people were following, some helping others, carrying children, supporting the elderly. 15. We emerged into the forest. Walt was there with a team of rangers, all holding UV lights that had pushed the fog back to create a safe zone. "Get everyone back!" I shouted. "It's going to collapse!" Rangers guided the confused returnees away from the fog bank, which was now pulsating rapidly. The grey colour shot through with bolts of strange lightning. So 5, 004, 003, Rebecca, and I ran to the rocks where we'd been before, climbing up for a better view. 02, 001. The device detonated with a silent flash of ultraviolet light, so bright it turned night to day for a split second. The fog circles throughout the forest seemed to implode, sucked back into the main incursion point like water down a drain. Then came the sound, a bass deep boom that I felt more than heard, vibrating in my chest and making the ground shudder. Beneath our feet, and then nothing. The fog was gone. The forest was silent for a moment before normal night sounds slowly returned, an owl hooting, leaves rustling in the breeze. Dr. Morgan found us still sitting on the rocks, watching as rangers and medical personnel tended to the returned people. "It worked," she said, her voice filled with awe. "You collapsed the gateway." "Rebecca did it," I said, my arm around my daughter's shoulders. "She found a way to free the people they'd taken." Dr. Morgan looked at Rebecca with new interest. "How?" Rebecca shook her head, looking suddenly tired. "I'm not sure I can explain it. I just knew." The aftermath was chaos, but the good kind. 52 people returned from the fog that night, some who had vanished days ago, like Miller and the Kellers, others who had been gone for years or even decades. Most were disoriented but physically unharmed. They described their time in the grey place as dreamlike, aware but unable to move or communicate. For all of them, it felt like only hours had passed, regardless of how long they'd been gone in our world. A few, like Martin, came back changed, white hair, reflective eyes, talking about the collective and the observers. These were the ones who had been studied most deeply, Dr. Morgan theorized. The ones whose minds had been more thoroughly connected to the entities. Walt's brother wasn't among the returnees. Some connections, it seemed, had been too complete to break. 2 weeks later, life was attempting to return to normal. The park was closed for environmental assessment, the official story being that unusual fog formations had caused hallucinations due to natural gas pockets. No one who hadn't experienced it believed the truth. Rebecca and I were having breakfast when she accidentally knocked over her orange juice. She yelped in surprise, and before either of us could grab a towel, a small patch of fog formed above. The spill, containing the liquid before it could spread. The fog evaporated instantly, leaving the juice gone without a trace. We stared at each other across the table. "That's new," I finally said. Rebecca nodded, looking at her hands. "It's been happening since that night. Small things, when I'm startled or upset." "Does it hurt?" "No. It feels natural, like it's always been part of me, just waiting to wake up." I reached across the table and took her hand. "We'll figure it out together." That night, I woke to the sound of Rebecca crying out in her sleep. I rushed to her room and found her sitting upright in bed, staring at the window. A small patch of fog hovered outside, moving against the wind. "Dad," she whispered, her eyes never leaving the window. "They're not all gone." in the fog. I could make out a familiar shape, tall and thin, watching us with a blank face that somehow still conveyed curiosity. "What does it want?" I asked, moving to stand between Rebecca and the window. "To learn," she said. "That's all they ever wanted, to understand us." The fog pressed against the glass but didn't come through. "They won't try to take anyone again." Rebecca continued. "Not like before. The gateway is closed. But thin places still exist, places where our worlds touch." "And you?" I asked, looking at her closely. "Are you a thin place now?" She nodded slowly. "I think part of me stayed there, and part of them came back with me." The fog receded from the window, the figure within it fading like mist in the morning sun. "What do we do?" I asked. Rebecca laid back down, pulling her blanket up. "We live with it, we learn from each other, and we remember to hope." Outside, the fog vanished completely, leaving only the normal darkness of a forest night. But I knew now what had always been true. There are thin places in this world where reality isn't as solid as we think. And sometimes things from beyond are watching, learning, trying to understand what makes us human. As I stood watching the night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah died. Hope. My name is Daniel Jefferson. I've been a ranger at Yellowstone National Park for nearly 5 years now. Before that, I was in the Army as a tracker. Not many people know what happened there, and I'd like to keep it that way. Let's just say I didn't leave on the best terms. The park still hasn't fully recovered from the big fires of '88, 3 years later, and you can still see the scars on the land. Blackened tree trunks reach up like bony fingers against the sky. But life always finds a way. Green shoots and new growth push up through the ash. It's beautiful in its own way. I was out on patrol one cold morning in October when I first found it. The elk, or what was left of it. "Damn," I whispered, crouching down beside the carcass. Something wasn't right. I've seen plenty of animal kills. In my time, wolf packs take down elk all the time, bears too, but this was different. The cuts were clean, too clean, like someone had used a knife or a scalpel, and certain parts were missing. Specific organs had been removed with surgical precision. I took photos and samples like protocol demanded. That's when I noticed the trees. Claw marks ran up the trunks, higher than any bear could reach, much higher, and they were deep, cutting into the wood like it was butter. A twig snapped behind me and I spun around, hand on my sidearm. "Whoa! Easy there, Jefferson." It was Sofia Rodriguez, the park's forensic specialist and my reluctant partner. She was smart, city-educated, and made it clear she thought I was a backwoods nobody. But she knew her stuff. I'll give her that. "What do you make of this?" I asked, gesturing to the elk. She knelt down, her dark eyebrows pulling together. This wasn't an animal, at least not any normal predator. Poachers? Maybe. But why take only certain organs? And look at these incisions. She pointed at the precision cuts. This was done by someone who knows anatomy. Or something, I muttered. Sophia rolled her eyes. "Let's stick to reality, Jefferson." Back at headquarters, I reported what we'd found to the chief ranger. He didn't seem concerned. "Probably just poachers getting creative," he said, but it didn't sit right with me. That night I called John Running Bear, our liaison with the Crow tribe. John was in his 60s, with a weathered face that told stories before he even opened his mouth. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said after hearing my description. Something in his voice told me he knew more than he was letting on. That night I couldn't sleep. The way those claw marks stretched up the trees kept playing in my mind. I've tracked wolves, bears, mountain lions. Nothing makes marks like that. Nothing I've ever seen anyway. The next morning I met with Dr. William Frost, the park veterinarian. He examined the samples I'd collected. "The precision is remarkable," he said almost admiringly. "The liver and pituitary gland are completely gone. And look at this tissue separation. It's like the organs were extracted while the animal was still alive." "Who would do something like that?" I asked. Not who? What? Dr. Frost looked up, his eyes gleaming with excitement. I've been collecting reports of unusual animal behavior across the park. Something's happening, Jefferson. Something big. I was about to ask him what he meant when the radio on my belt crackled. Jefferson, we've got reports of entire wolf packs abandoning their territories in the northern range, came the dispatcher's voice. Can you check it out? On my way, I replied. As I headed out, I ran into Charlotte Evans, a documentary filmmaker who'd been hanging around the park for months, filming its recovery from the fires. She had her camera pointed at me before I could avoid her. Ranger Jefferson, any comments on the unusual wildlife movements we've been observing? Her microphone was thrust toward my face. Just normal seasonal changes, I lied, stepping around her. That's not what the wolves are saying, she called after me. They're running from something. What do you think that something is? I didn't answer, because the truth was I had no idea. But I was going to find out. By the time John Running Bear met me at the northern range, I'd confirmed the reports. 3 separate wolf packs had abandoned their territories, moving south in a hurry. It wasn't normal behavior, especially not with winter coming. The wolves know, John said, looking out over the empty valley. They can sense when something dangerous has entered their world. Like what? I asked. John was quiet for a long moment. There are old stories among my people. Stories of beings that walk between worlds, between animal and man. I laughed nervously. You're talking about werewolves. John didn't smile. I'm talking about something much older, something that was here long before the first white settlers came. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, a howl echoed in the distance. It started like a wolf's cry, but changed into something else, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. John grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. We should not be here after dark, he said, not when the hunter's moon is coming. We left. But that strange howl followed us all the way back to the ranger station, and so did the feeling that something was watching us from the trees. Over the next week we found 4 more mutilated animals, each one with the same surgical cuts, each missing the same organs, and each one killed exactly 3.5 days before the full moon. I started marking the locations on a map. They formed a pattern, spiraling inward toward an isolated area of the park called Devil's Throat, a deep geological formation that few tourists ever visited. I didn't know it then, but I was already being drawn into a hunt unlike any I'd experienced before. And this time, I wasn't the hunter, I was the prey. The next morning, I spread my map across my desk. Red pins marked each kill site. Blue pins showed where wolf packs had abandoned their territories. When you looked at them together, they made a clear spiral pattern, all pointing to Devil's Throat. What are you working on? Sophia asked, leaning against my doorway with a coffee mug in her hand. I waved her over. Look at this pattern. Something's using Devil's Throat as a home base. Sophia studied the map, her forehead wrinkling. That's weird, really weird. I'm heading out there today, I said, folding up the map. Want to come? She hesitated. Devil's Throat. That's pretty remote, Jefferson. That's why I need a partner, I said. Safety in numbers. The truth was, after what I'd seen, and that strange howl I'd heard, I didn't want to go alone. But I'd never admit that to Sophia. 2 hours later, we were hiking through dense forest, heading toward the center of the spiral. Devil's Throat was a narrow canyon with steep walls and a small cave system. Not many people ventured out this far. So what exactly are we looking for? Sophia asked as we hiked. I'll know it when I see it, I mumbled. Great plan, she said, rolling her eyes. We had just started setting up camera traps along the likely approach routes when Sophia grabbed my arm. Did you hear that? She whispered. I froze. At first I heard nothing but the wind in the trees, then a soft crunch of leaves. Something was moving through the forest about 50 yards to our right. Something big. I slowly turned my head. Through The trees, I caught a glimpse of movement. Dark fur, much taller than a normal wolf or bear. It was standing upright. "Don't move," I breathed. The figure paused. Even from this distance, I could feel it watching us. Then it moved again, with a strange, fluid grace that no human could match. It disappeared behind a stand of pines. What was that? Sophia's voice shook. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But it wasn't a bear or a wolf." We finished setting up the cameras as quickly as we could and got out of there. Later, when we checked the footage, all we got was static and strange, distorted audio. Like growling mixed with words. Back at headquarters, John Running Bear was waiting for me. One look at my face and he knew. "You saw it," he said simply. I nodded. "Come with me," he said. He drove us to the edge of the reservation and led me to his small cabin. Inside, the walls were covered with old photographs and drawings. He pointed to one, a crude sketch from the 1800s, showing an upright wolf-like creature with human hands. "My people call them skinwalkers," John said. "Medicine men who committed terrible acts to gain dark power, the power to transform." "That's just a legend," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" John asked. "Then what did you see today?" I had no answer. The next day, the chief ranger called me into his office. His face was grim. "We've got 2 dead campers," he said. "Backcountry site near Devil's Throat." My stomach dropped. "How?" "That's why I called you. It matches your elk cases. Same surgical precision, same missing organs. I drove out with the forensic team. The scene was worse than I imagined. The bodies were arranged in strange positions, almost like some kind of ritual. Clean incisions, just like the animals. Both victims were missing their pituitary glands and livers. "This doesn't make sense," Sophia said as we examined the scene. "No human killer does this, and no animal is this precise." I checked my calendar. The deaths had occurred exactly 3.5 days before the upcoming full moon, just like the animals. When Dr. Frost arrived to help with the examination, I noticed something strange about him. He seemed excited rather than disturbed. "Fascinating," he kept muttering as he took samples. "People are dead, Frost," I snapped. Yes, of course, tragic." But his eyes were gleaming. "But don't you see? This confirms my theory. It's selecting specific organs. It's intelligent." "What theory?" I demanded. "What do you know?" Dr. Frost looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "I've been researching unusual predator reports in this area for years. There are patterns, Jefferson, 12-year cycles, and we're in the middle of one now." He pulled a small journal from his bag. "I've documented everything. The 1979 incidents, the 1967 attacks, all with the same signature. Why haven't you reported this? Would you have believed me? Would anyone?" He shook his head. "I needed proof, and now I have it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those bodies, arranged, like some kind of offering. And that glimpse of the creature through the trees. Too tall to be a wolf, too agile to be a human in costume." The next morning, I visited John again and told him about the campers. "It's growing stronger," he said solemnly. "Each feeding increases its power. What does it want? To survive, to keep changing. The organs it takes, they contain hormones that help it maintain its human mind during transformation." "How do you know all this?" I asked. John looked away. "Because my grandfather encountered it. In 1955, he was one of the few who survived." As we talked, my radio crackled. Another body had been found, this time a solitary hiker, about 2 miles from Devil's Throat. I was starting to see the full picture now, and it terrified me. Whatever this thing was, skinwalker, werewolf, or something science had no name for, it was hunting methodically, planning its kills, and the pattern suggested it was working towards something big when the full moon arrived in 3 days. Needed to stop it before then. But how do you hunt something that's part human, part animal, and maybe part something else entirely? I was about to find out The next morning, Dr. Frost didn't show up for work. His truck was gone from the parking lot, and he wasn't answering his radio. Has anyone seen Dr. Frost? I asked around headquarters. The chief ranger shrugged. Maybe he took a personal day, but I had a bad feeling. After our last conversation, I suspected Frost might have gone looking for the creature on his own. To get his proof, I tried calling his home. No answer. I checked his office and found his door unlocked. Inside, papers were scattered everywhere. Photos of animal mutilations from years past were pinned to a corkboard. Old newspaper clippings about mysterious deaths in Yellowstone dating back to the 1800s, and a map similar to mine, with the same spiral pattern centered on Devil's Throat. But Frost had added something I hadn't. Dates. Full moon dates going back decades. Each cluster of killings happened during the same month every 12 years. Oh no, I whispered, grabbing my radio. Chief, I need a search team. Frost is missing, and I think he's in danger. Based on what? The chief asked. How could I explain that I thought a monster was hunting in our park, that it had a taste for human organs? Trust me, I said. He might have gone to Devil's Throat alone. The chief sighed. Fine. Take Rodriguez with you. But if this is another one of your hunches, Jefferson, I was already out the door. Sophia and I drove as far as we could, then hiked the rest of the way. Dark clouds were rolling in, bringing the promise of rain. You really think Frost came out here by himself? Sophia asked. He's been obsessed with these killings for years, I explained. He wouldn't pass up a chance to see the creature. We followed the trail toward Devil's Throat, moving as quietly as we could. The wind had picked up, making the trees creak and groan. Perfect cover for something that didn't want to be heard. Look, Sophia pointed to the ground. Boot prints. Frost's size. We followed them to a small clearing and stopped dead. There was blood everywhere, a lot of it. And in the middle of the clearing, Frost's camera, smashed to pieces. Oh, God, Sophia whispered. I knelt down to examine the tracks. Boot prints coming in, but what went out? Those weren't human footprints. They were massive paw prints, but unlike any I'd seen before. The front prints showed something disturbing, signs of an opposable thumb. We radioed for backup and a forensic team, then continued searching the area. We found Frost's body about 100 yards away, or what was left of it. He'd been partially eaten. Just like the other victims, specific organs were removed with surgical precision. But the rest was torn apart, like the creature had lost control. I can't do this, Sophia said, turning away. I couldn't blame her. In all my years as a ranger, all my time in the army, I'd never seen anything like this. As the forensic team worked the scene, I searched for Frost's research journal. He'd mentioned documenting everything, but it wasn't on his body or in the clearing. The creature had taken it. That struck me as odd. Why would it take a book? Unless it could read, unless it was as intelligent as Frost had suggested. That night, after we'd brought Frost's body back, John running. Bear came to see me. The killing has escalated, he said. It's growing desperate. Why? I asked. What does it want? The full moon is almost here, John explained. During the full moon, the transformation is complete. But without the organs it needs, it loses its human mind entirely, becomes pure animal. And with the organs, it can control the change, keep its human intelligence, continue its existence. I thought about the surgical precision of the cuts, the methodical pattern of killings, the stolen journal. This thing, it understands what it's doing, I said slowly. It's harvesting. John nodded grimly. And it will kill again before the moon is full. I needed to know more, what we were dealing with, how to stop it. The next morning, I gathered everything I could find in Frost's office and brought it to the conference room. I spread it all out and started piecing together the history. According to Frost's notes, the first recorded killings that matched this pattern happened in 1879, just after the park was established. Thomas Wolfert, one of the first naturalists in Yellowstone, disappeared while investigating animal deaths. His colleague, Dr. Alexander Wolcott, led the search but never found him. Then, 12 years later, it happened again and again. Every 12 years, like clockwork, I was deep in the research when Charlotte Evans, the documentary filmmaker, burst into the room. "Ranger Jefferson, is it true? Dr. Frost was killed by the same thing that's been mutilating the animals?" "How? Did you hear about that?" I demanded. "News travels fast," she said, already filming me with her handheld camera. "I've been documenting unusual predator activity in the park for months. This could be the breakthrough I've been waiting for." "This isn't a story, Ms. Evans. It's a tragedy, and potentially dangerous for everyone in the park. Which is why people need to know," she insisted. "My crew and I are heading to Devil's Throat tomorrow night to set up. The full moon will make for dramatic lighting, and if this creature is real—" "Are you insane?" I stood up. "Something out there killed Frost. And 2 campers. You need to stay away from Devil's Throat," she smiled. "So you do think there's something out there, something more than a bear or a wolf." I realized my mistake too late. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted, confirmation from a park ranger. "If you go out there, you're putting yourself in danger," I warned. "Risk comes with the job," she said, heading for the door. "We'll be careful." After she left, I continued going through Frost's research. One file caught my attention. Old tribal. Police reports from the Crow Reservation. In 1967, during the last cycle, 3 tribal members had gone missing. 2 were found dead with the familiar surgical cuts. The 3rd was never found. But what really jumped out at me was a detail in one report. A survivor, badly wounded, claimed to have seen the creature up close. He described it as a 7-foot-tall bipedal wolf with white patches in its black fur. It had tried to speak to him before attacking. Tried to speak. The same day, I got a disturbing call from Dr. Peterson, the medical examiner who'd autopsied the campers and Frost. "Jefferson, there's something you need to see," he said. At the morgue, Peterson showed me something under the microscope, tissue samples from all 3 victims. "Their cells are showing strange changes," he explained, "almost like their DNA was being altered at the time of death." "Altered how?" "I don't know, I've never seen anything like it, but whatever killed them, it might be contagious." I thought about the creature's saliva entering wounds, a bite or a scratch passing something on. "Like rabies?" I asked. "No, much more complex. It's changing specific parts of the genetic code." Peterson looked up at me. "If I didn't know better, I'd say it was trying to transform them." That night, I dreamed of running through dark woods, chasing something I couldn't see. When I woke up, sweating and disoriented, I knew what I had to do. I had to hunt this thing down before the full moon, before it could kill again. But first, I needed special equipment. If myths about werewolves had any truth to them, regular bullets wouldn't be enough. I needed something that could actually hurt this creature. And I needed to find out what it really was before it was too late. I went back to Frost's office early the next morning and searched through everything again. This time, I found a locked drawer in his desk. I broke it open and found his personal journal. Not his research notes, but his private thoughts. The last entry was dated the day before he disappeared. I believe I found a way to stop it. Wolcott's original notes mentioned silver nitrate injections as a potential treatment. If silver nitrate can slow the transformation, perhaps it can be weaponized. I prepared several syringes. Tomorrow I'll see if my theory is correct. Under the journal was a small case. Inside were 3 syringes filled with clear liquid, carefully packed. I took the case and went to find Sophia. She was in the lab, examining samples from Frost's autopsy. "I need your help," I said, showing her the syringes. "Can you tell me what's in these?" She carefully extracted a tiny amount and ran some tests. "It's a concentrated silver nitrate solution," she confirmed. "Pretty strong stuff. Why would Frost have this? I hesitated, then decided to tell her everything. About the 12-year cycles, the skinwalker legends, the DNA changes Peterson had found. To my surprise, she didn't laugh. I've been seeing the evidence too, she admitted. Whatever this is, it's not something science can easily explain. She looked at the syringes. You're going after it, aren't you? I nodded. Then you'll need more than just silver nitrate. She reached into her desk and pulled out a small bottle. Wolfsbane tincture. My grandmother was into herbal medicine, said it protected against evil. You believe in that stuff? I believe in covering all my bases. She handed me the bottle. Be careful, Jefferson. I took the silver nitrate solution and wolfsbane to the armory. The chief gave me a strange look when I asked for permission to modify some ammunition, but he didn't ask questions. He'd seen Frost's body too. I carefully filled several hollow-point bullets with the silver nitrate solution, then added a few drops of the wolfsbane tincture. I didn't know if it would work, but it was better than nothing. As I was loading the specialized ammo into my rifle, John Running Bear arrived. Evans and her film crew left for Devil's Throat an hour ago, he said. What? The full moon isn't until tomorrow night. They wanted to set up early, get establishing shots. John looked worried. The creature will be growing stronger as the moon waxes. It'll be aggressive, desperate to complete its harvest before the full transformation. I grabbed my gear. I have to warn them. Wait, John said. You can't go alone. I'm not asking anyone else to risk their lives. You don't understand, John insisted. My grandfather didn't just encounter this thing. He tracked it, studied it, learned its weaknesses. And what are those? It can be killed like any creature, but it's smart. It knows these woods better than you do, and it has power over fear itself. What do you mean? If it catches your eyes, it can paralyze you with terror, make you unable to move or fight back. That's how it takes its victims so cleanly. John handed me a small pouch. Burnt sage and bear root, an old protection. I took the pouch, trying not to show my skepticism. One more thing, John said. In all the old stories, there's a way to end the cycle permanently. You have to kill it while it's between forms. Not fully human, not fully beast. I radioed Sophia and told her where I was going. If I'm not back by morning, send a search party to Devil's Throat. But tell them to come armed and careful. She wanted to come with me, but I convinced her to stay behind as backup. If things went wrong, someone needed to know the full story. The hike to Devil's Throat took longer than usual. I moved carefully, stopping often to listen and check for tracks. The woods seemed unnaturally quiet. No birds, no small animals. Everything was hiding. By late afternoon, I reached the rim of the canyon. Below, I could see Evans's camp. 2 tents, camera equipment, a small fire. 3 people moved around the site. They seemed unaware of the danger they were in. I was about to call down to them when I noticed something strange. The camp was set up right at the mouth of the largest cave in the canyon wall, right where the creature would likely have its den. Why would they set up there of all places, unless... I raised my binoculars and focused on Evans. She was setting up a camera, pointing it at the cave entrance. But her movements were too deliberate, too knowing. She wasn't just hoping to catch footage of the creature. She knew exactly where it lived. She'd known all along. I needed to get down there, but the trail was steep and winding. It would take at least 30 minutes to reach the bottom safely. That's when I heard the scream. One of Evans' crew, a young man with a sound pack, was backing away from the cave entrance. Something dark and massive was emerging from the shadows. Even from this distance, I could see it clearly now. 7 feet tall, standing on 2 legs. Dark fur with white patches on its chest and face. A wolf's head, but more angular, with intelligent eyes, and its hands, long-fingered with sharp claws, but clearly able to grip and manipulate like human hands. The dogman, the skinwalker. Whatever name you wanted to give it, the creature was real and it was right there in front of me. I raised my rifle, but the angle was bad. The crew member was in my line of fire. The creature moved with shocking speed. It grabbed the sound technician and dragged him into the cave before I could even shout a warning. Evans and her other crew member didn't run. Instead, they followed, cameras rolling. They weren't afraid. They were filming. I scrambled down the trail as fast as I dared, nearly falling several times. By the time I reached the bottom, the light was fading. The entrance to the cave loomed dark and forbidding. I could hear voices inside. Not screams, but actual conversation. With my rifle ready, I crept into the cave entrance. The tunnel widened quickly into a large chamber lit by Evans' camera lights. And there, in the center, was something I never expected to see. Evans was talking to the creature, actually talking to it. And it was responding in a deep, rumbling voice that was partly growl, partly human speech. "Need more time," it was saying. "The moon comes. Without the final harvest, I lose myself completely." "We had a deal," Evans said coldly. "You give me exclusive footage, the story of the century, and I provide you with what you need." That's when I saw the sound technician. He was bound but alive, looking terrified. The creature turned its massive head toward the cave entrance. It had sensed me. "You brought others?" it growled at Evans. "No," she said, turning. Her face showed genuine surprise when she saw me. "Jefferson, how did you find us?" "Step away from that thing, Evans," I ordered, keeping my rifle trained on the creature's chest. The creature didn't attack. It watched me with unnervingly human eyes. "You don't understand," Evans said. "This isn't what you think. He's not just killing randomly. He needs these organs to survive, to maintain his humanity." "He?" I kept my aim steady. "You know what this thing is?" "Not what," she said. "Who?" "This is Dr. Alexander Woolcott." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Woolcott, the naturalist from the 1800s, the one who had searched for his missing colleague. "That's impossible," I said. "Woolcott would be over 150 years old." The creature, Woolcott, made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The blessing and curse of my condition, Ranger. I do not age as you do." "You killed those people," I said. "You killed Frost." "I had no choice," the creature growled. "The cycle demands it. Without the organs, the hormones they contain, I lose my mind, become no more than a beast." "So you murder innocent people to keep yourself human?" I felt sick. "I take only what I need from as few as possible," it said. "I've controlled this hunger for over a century, killed only when necessary." Evans stepped between us. "That's why I'm helping him. Think about what we could learn. His condition could revolutionize medicine, explain legends that have existed for centuries. By sacrificing people," I said flatly. "Sacrifices for a greater purpose," she argued. "Science requires difficult choices sometimes." I realized then how deep this went. Evans hadn't stumbled onto this story. She'd made a deal with a monster. "Move aside," I told her. "I'm ending this now." Before she could respond, the other crew member grabbed her and pulled her away. "Run!" he shouted. "It's losing control." I looked at the creature and saw the change happening. Its eyes were losing their human intelligence, becoming more animal-like. Its body was shifting, growing larger, more wolf-like. The transformation was beginning, and I had only seconds to act. I raised my rifle and fired. The special bullet hit Woolcott in the shoulder. He roared in pain, a sound that was half human, half beast. Where the silver nitrate entered his body, the fur seemed to burn away, revealing human skin underneath. "Run!" I shouted to Evans and her crew. "Get out now!" The crew member dragged Evans toward the exit, but she fought against him. "No, we can still help him." Woolcott fell to his knees, his body twisting and changing. The transformation was speeding up, fur sprouting across his body, his face elongating into a full wolf's snout. I fired again, hitting him in the leg. Another howl of pain. but then his eyes locked with mine. Those yellow, inhuman eyes. And suddenly I couldn't move. A wave of pure terror washed over me, freezing my muscles, making it hard to even breathe. John had warned me about this, the creature's power to paralyze with fear. With shaking hands, I reached for the pouch John had given me. Burnt sage and bare root. I crushed it in my palm and breathed in the sharp, earthy smell. The fear eased just enough. I could move again. Wolcott was fully transformed now, more beast than man. He charged at me, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Dove to the side, rolling behind a large boulder as claws slashed where I had been standing a second before. Jefferson, it was the sound technician still tied up near the back of the cave. Help me! I fired another shot around the boulder, not really aiming, just trying to keep the creature back. The bullet grazed Wolcott's arm, and he retreated. With a snarl, I used the moment to run to the technician and cut his ropes with my knife. Go, I told him. Follow the others out. He didn't need to be told twice. I turned back to face Wolcott, but he was gone. The cave seemed empty. Then I heard a shuffling sound above me. I looked up just as Wolcott dropped from a ledge near the ceiling. He landed on me, his weight knocking the rifle from my hands and pinning me to the ground. His hot breath hit my face as jaws full of sharp teeth snapped inches from my throat. I held him back with both hands, my arms shaking with the effort. Wolcott, I gasped. Alexander Wolcott, I know who you are. The creature paused, its eyes flickering with something like recognition. You were a scientist, I continued, desperate to reach whatever humanity remained. You wanted to help people, not kill them, Wolcott growled but didn't bite. His eyes seemed to clear slightly. Using all my strength, I pushed him off and scrambled away. My rifle was too far to reach, but I pulled out my sidearm. Regular bullets wouldn't kill him, but they might slow him down. Instead of attacking again, Wolcott backed away. He moved to the far wall of the cave and scratched at it with his claws. I realized he was writing something. Crude letters scraped into the stone. Not choice. Curse. I know, I said, keeping my gun trained on him. But you've killed innocent people to survive. He scratched more words. Show you. Truth. Wolcott turned and moved deeper into the cave. After a moment's hesitation, I followed, keeping my distance. The tunnel wound downward, opening into a larger chamber. What I saw there stopped me in my tracks. The walls were covered with writings, drawings, and photos, a century and a half of records. Journals were stacked neatly on stone shelves, alongside modern textbooks on biology and medicine. One section held medical equipment, microscopes, test tubes, even a small refrigeration unit powered by a car battery. This wasn't just a den. It was a laboratory, a home. Wolcott moved to a desk and picked up a journal with his clawed hands. He pushed it toward me. I kept my gun raised as I picked it up. It was dated 1879. I have been attacked by something in the woods, the first entry read. Thomas is dead. The creature bit me before I could kill it. I am changing. God help me, I am changing. Further entries documented Wolcott's transformation and his desperate search for a cure. He had discovered that by consuming certain organs, rich in specific hormones, he could maintain his human mind even in beast form. The hunger is terrible, he had written, but I must not give in. I must find another way. I looked up at Wolcott. He was watching me, his eyes now more human than wolf despite his monstrous appearance. You've been trying to cure yourself, I realized. All this time. He nodded, then pointed to a newer journal, Frost's research journal, the one that had gone missing. I opened it and found Frost's notes about Wolcott. He had suspected the truth and come looking for proof. But instead of exposing Wolcott, he had offered to help find a cure. The silver nitrate shows promise, Frost had written. Injections. Reduce transformation symptoms by 60%. With more research, we might end the cycle entirely. Wolcott scratched on the wall again. Frost friend, accident, lost control. You didn't mean to kill him, I said. Wolcott shook his head, his eyes full of what looked like grief. As I was processing this, I heard voices from the main chamber. Evans had returned with her camera. "Jefferson, are you alive in there?" "Stay back," I called. But she entered anyway, camera light blazing. When she saw Wolcott in his half-transformed state, she gasped. "It's happening," she whispered, filming everything. "The transformation." "Put that down," I told her. "This isn't a documentary. This is a man's life." "A man?" she laughed. "That thing isn't human anymore," Wolcott growled, advancing toward her. "Evans, run!" I shouted, but it was too late. Wolcott lunged, knocking the camera from her hands. His claws slashed, barely missing her throat as she stumbled backward. I fired my gun, hitting Wolcott in the back. He turned on me with a roar, fully animal now. Whatever humanity had been there moments before was gone. I emptied my clip into him, slowing him down but not stopping him. I reached for my hunting knife as he charged. At the last second, a shot rang out from the cave entrance. Wolcott jerked. Back! A special silver nitrate bullet in his chest. Sophia stood in the entrance, rifle raised. John running bare beside her. "Jefferson, move!" she shouted, firing again. Wolcott howled in pain as more silver nitrate entered his system. He staggered, then fell to his knees. I approached cautiously. Wolcott looked up at me, and I saw his eyes clearing again. The human returning. With evident effort, he scratched one final message on the cave floor. "End it. Please." I looked into the eyes of the creature, of the man trapped inside, and saw only exhaustion. A century and a half of fighting against his nature, of killing to survive. I raised my knife. "Wait!" Evans cried. "You can't! Think of what we could learn." But I wasn't thinking about science. I was thinking about mercy. The knife plunged into Wolcott's heart. His body convulsed once, then went still. Before our eyes, the fur began to recede. The wolf features melted away, revealing the face of an old man with white hair and a beard, Dr. Alexander Wolcott, looking exactly as he did in photographs from the 1800s, only older, much older. "It's over," I whispered. We wrapped Wolcott's body and carried it out of the cave. By the time we reached the ranger station, official orders had come down. The entire incident was to be classified as animal attacks. Devil's Throat was declared temporarily closed for environmental recovery. When I objected, the chief ranger took me aside. "Think about it, Jefferson. What do you want us to tell people? That a 150-year-old werewolf was killing people in Yellowstone? We'd be laughingstocks. The park would become a circus." Deep down, I knew he was right. Some truths are too strange for the world to accept. Evans' footage mysteriously disappeared from evidence. She threatened to go public with her story anyway, but without proof. Who would believe her? Just another filmmaker making wild claims. For publicity. A week later, I was out patrolling when I met John Running Bear on the trail. "The cycle is broken," he said simply. "You did good." "Then why doesn't it feel good?" I asked. "Because you saw the man inside the monster," John replied. "You understood his struggle." I nodded, but something had been bothering me. During the final fight, I got a cut on my arm from his claws. John's face turned serious. "Show me." I rolled up my sleeve. The cut was already nearly healed, much faster than normal. "What does it mean?" I asked, though I feared I already knew. "It means you need to come with me," John said. "There are things I need to teach you, ways to control what's coming." "And if I can't control it?" John looked me in the eye. "Then you'll have a choice to make, a harder choice than the one you made for Wolcott." As we walked through the forest, I felt different. My senses seemed sharper. I could smell things I'd never noticed before, hear sounds that should have been too faint. Above us, the moon was waning, growing smaller night by night, but in 12 years it would be full again. And I would face the hunter's moon as something more than human. Some cycles, it seems, are never truly broken. They just find new ways to continue.